across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, you're listening to Talk. This is Mark Dolan in for Ian Collins as we come to terms with the terribly sad news of the unexpected passing of Ann Widdecombe, a formidable figure in British public life and someone that I considered a personal friend. We'll be looking back at her extraordinary career, her extraordinary life, her extraordinary story. Ann was very much a member of the Talk family and enhanced this network whenever she appeared on it, which was multiple times a week. And I'm privileged to have conducted her last conversation on this network just 2 days ago. And Ann's passing brings with it a simple question, which is, are authentic, principled politicians a thing of the past? What do you think? My phone number is 0344 499 1000. You can text the word TALK in your message to 87222 or leave us a voice note. And I'd like your memories of Ann. I'm just straightening my tie because whenever she came on the show, she was always very strict with me about my appearance, about my comments, about my opinions. And my goodness, she will be missed. So are authentic, principled politicians a thing of the past? I want to ask you a simple question. Is there a genuine politician left in Britain? Has authenticity disappeared from British politics? Meanwhile, a police officer is hospitalised after being attacked with a bottle by a Moroccan football fan during the World Cup. We'll bring you the latest. And the political fallout continues following Nigel Farage's decision to resign his seat of Clacton-on-Sea, sparking a by-election. Will that decision backfire? So many stories to get through. 0344 499 1000. Yana is taking your calls. Luke is directing our TV output. Finley's in charge. Amy is pressing the buttons. Well, we'll kick off the show with my tribute to Ann Widdecombe. Now, of course, as a politics nerd, I've known Ann for decades, but I got to know her personally when we began broadcasting together around the year 2000, I would say, something of that ilk. And she's been a regular feature in all of my broadcasting work over many years. And in fact, at my last place of work, Ann was the only person who was a fixed regular guest on my show every Sunday night at 10 p.m. It was always memorable, always compelling, always entertaining. And of course, she's been a regular here at Talk on various shows, including my own. I never needed an excuse to get Ann on the show because I knew that what you would get is truth bombs, you would get wit, guile, courage, articulacy, brain power, authenticity, wisdom. She had it all. She was an amazing lady. And on one occasion, she came into the studio to do these regular appearances, which were normally down the line, face to face. And I was shocked at just how diminutive she is, how tiny she was. So what a big personality in a tiny body. No one expected her to pass this quickly, and it's a complete tragedy. She had so much more living to do, so much more to give to British public life, something that she's done for decades as an MP, as a government minister, and then as a political commentator and broadcaster. She's been taken from us far too early. She was so young, she was so strong, and she was so fit. And I'm really saddened by the news. No one expected this. And of course, we'll get details about what may or may not have happened in the days ahead. But it's not my understanding that Ann had a long illness. And it seems like her higher power, to whom she devoted her life, decided to take her at this moment. And that will have happened with Ann's grace and goodwill, because she was a woman of deep faith, deep, deep Christian values. And that was a big part of her political worldview. So she's gone so quickly. And I've got to say that, notwithstanding that she's been taken from us very young as a fit and formidable person, there are no real positives, but I will think that she's gone out at the top, at the height of her powers, having been on this network with me just a couple of days ago in a wonderful interview in which she was as feisty and fiery as ever and had lost none of her grit, none of her intelligence, none of her wisdom, none of her insight. She was great. You know, she took no prisoners either and often called me a silly man, which we know I am. We'd get into debates. She loved debates. She lived for politics. She lived for the competition of ideas. The other big thing about Anne is she was very ideologically consistent, something that I reminded her of all the time. And the reason why she left the Tories, I think, was very damning, because she said to me on the show that the Tories were institutionally woke, and that's why she left. Now, the original reason why she left was to get Brexit done. But she completely parted company with this new Tories 2.0, who were and are glorified Liberal Democrats. So really, she didn't leave the Tories, they left her, which demonstrates just how consistent she was. And of course, she was a massive advocate of Brexit. That's one of the reasons why she went to the Brexit Party, became a Brexit Party MEP. And so let's hear her in action in the European Parliament, giving those Brussels bureaucrats absolute hell.
17.4 million people in the biggest democratic turnout in British history voted to leave. We ended up in the European elections as the single biggest party in this parliament. Why? Why did Boris Johnson get such a massive majority in the last election? Because his basic promise was get Brexit done.
Very principled, and what an orator as well. Here's another great clip from the European Parliament. I mean, this is just, I'm going to be mainlining these for days and days to come now.
There is a pattern consistent throughout history of oppressed people turning on the oppressors, slaves against their owners, the peasantry against the feudal barons, colonies, Mr. Verhofstadt, against their empires. And that is why Britain is leaving. And it doesn't matter which language you use, we are going, and we are glad to be going.
Just incredible. She did live for politics. She was very ideologically consistent. She was a woman of faith. And I think that her loss is not just one to broadcasting and to public life, and of course her family and friends. But I do think Anne's passing is a loss to Reform UK as well. And Nigel was on the breakfast show this morning with JK, and he is absolutely devastated about this. And I think that he knows that when Anne came to Reform and became a Reform UK supporter, that was a massive advantage to him. Because Anne came with this status, this gravitas, this political pedigree, this public respect, because whether you were on the left or the right, everyone liked and respected Ann Widdecombe. And I think she was a massive asset to Reform UK. Obviously, previously very active, making speeches at Reform Conference, but latterly, because of her health issues, just a commentator and an effective spokesperson for Reform UK, which is what she did with me on Wednesday. And I think that it's going to be a loss to Reform, because I feel that Anne carried that weight that the party really valued. And I think that she was in many ways the sort of spiritual soul of the Reform project, and they will have trouble replacing her. And otherwise, a couple of other bits and pieces. She went on a Louis Theroux documentary. He's a very, in my opinion, obnoxious and creepy man. I think he's very cynical. I don't like Louis Theroux. And he tried to stitch her up, and she wasn't having any of it. He was obsessed with why she didn't have children. That's none of his business. But as with all of her opponents, she gave him short shrift, and she took no nonsense. She was incredibly British. She was pro-Brexit. She was non-tribal. She didn't care about Tories, Reform, Labour, Greens. She cared about Britain. She was funny. She lived life on her own terms. She was a fantastic public speaker, an excellent writer, an amazing Home Office minister, a great MP. She would have been a great Prime Minister. Let's take a listen now to my last conversation with Ann Widdecombe on this very network just 2 days ago when I was covering breakfast for Jeremy Kyle.
I've got very little trust left now in parliamentary processes. And if you look at this government, which has a majority on that committee, look at the way that it's reacted when it's felt vulnerable, you know, changes to political donations, cancelling local elections. Nigel is challenging that establishment, and he's called this the establishment versus the people.
And always a joy and a deep privilege to have you on the show. We are your number one fan. We look forward to catching up soon. My thanks to the redoubtable Ann Widdecombe, former Home Office Minister, broadcaster, best-selling author and politics legend. Funny how I chose those words. Little did I know that would be my last conversation with the amazing Ann Widdecombe. One final thought. Notwithstanding her career in politics and public life, she also won hearts and minds on Strictly with her fantastic dance performances, demonstrating her ability to laugh at herself, but not just that, her determination, her courage and her grit when she was on Strictly. After all, Ann was strictly authentic, strictly brave, strictly funny, strictly beautiful, strictly herself, strictly special. Ann Widdecombe, may she rest in peace. Let's get reaction to the very sad passing of politics legend Ann Widdecombe in the company of a very good friend of mine, Steve N. Allen, comedian and broadcaster. Hello, Steve.
Hello, good to be with you.
Ann transcended politics, didn't she? She was just a big national personality.
Yeah, and that's another thing we're losing, another one that we lose, because politics these days has no sharp edges, does it? That's what I was thinking this morning about the fact that she was so genuine. Politically, it's not like I thoroughly overlapped in the Venn diagram, me and Anne. I only got to work with her a few times. Indeed, every time I worked with her was when I was standing in for you. So basically, you're the one who introduced us. I was there on the day, actually, when she came into the studio and helped to get down to the studios in the lift, had a little chat. But for the times whenever I've worked with her, I was impressed by the fact that even though we'd probably disagree on stuff, you get the sense that she was always actually listening to any points that were being made so that they could be analysed and actually talked about, rather than, I shut you down because I disagree with you. I don't listen to what you say because I don't think you have the right to say it. Proper discussions. So we lose that today. We also lose the fact that politics now, because of media training probably, and focus groups have worked out that if you shave all the reality off someone and make them some bland carbon cutout of what a politician should be, they'll never say anything that might be controversial. Great, you've made yourself wallpaper, background noise in the lives of everyone else. That's not what politics should be. Conviction, that's what we're seeing in, this is what I think will be the next level of politics, getting back to conviction and authenticity. And yeah, sure, that means someone might say a sentence that people try and pick on, people try and find a reason to cancel. No, I'd rather listen to what someone genuinely means, because then you know what they'll do when they're in the power. And one of the things we could talk about on the show today is people getting that top job and we have no idea what they stand for. That's a big risk. That would not have happened with Ann Widdecombe.
Most definitely not. And she loved debate. She lived for the competition of ideas, Steve.
Yeah, and so what a shame that we lose more of that. What we actually need is people understanding that debate is how we all move forwards. I obviously don't know all of the policies that Anne stood for, but there is no way she didn't change her mind through her life. You know what I mean? Because she was definitely a person who listened to new information and took it in. And the point of debate is so that both sides can learn more and move forwards. I heard a lovely quote that debate is not about proving that you're right. It's making both of us correct. That is exactly what she embodied. So, yeah, I mean, such a huge loss, an actual personality that was a joy to listen to. And obviously we're sitting here because of where we are talking about politics. But you're so right to mention the national status, being on Strictly. Was it Big Brother with the other reality show that she went on? She had the status of actually being someone that people listened to, whether you agreed with her politically or not. She had the ability to reach out and connect to an audience.
Most definitely. And there is definitely going to be a big Anne-shaped hole in public life now, and it's going to be a problem. And I think it's a problem for Reform UK, because I think in many ways she was an important flag bearer for the project, wasn't she? And some people say Reform don't have enough prominent women on board. So Anne will be a great loss for Farage, I would have thought.
Yeah, and it's not just the gender side of it, is it? One thing that Reform's been doing with recruiting some of the new tranche of former Tories is that they seem to be bringing with them the reputation of the troublesome 14 years, the history of doing things which we're still paying for. Anne was from a generation before, wasn't she? She was active in politics when things were being discussed that actually we might want to see more of. She brought a level of expertise. The biggest argument you can have against reform is that they don't have the expertise with them. She had that hands on the wheel, actually doing things, rather than bringing across expertise that brings with it some of the more recent issues. So she was a good catch. And I know that the transition was made because of the Brexit issue, but you're right. She brought a level of power to the fist of reform that now they've lost.
Most definitely. Well, coming up with Steve N. Allen, a few stories to get through. Has Nigel Farage bitten off more than he can chew by resigning his Clacton-on-Sea seat? The shocking attack on a police officer by a Morocco fan during the World Cup. And it's official. Andy Burnham will be our next Prime Minister after 322 Labour MPs back him. Is this a shameless stitch-up? That's next.
Labour, interestingly, saying they're considering an emergency law to deport that grooming gang leader. This is Shabir Ahmed, who served 14 years of his 22-year sentence for 30 child rape cases. He got less than 6 months. Basically, if you're going to be a child rapist, you know what, you may as well rape 40 instead of 1, because the sentence is basically the same. I mean, we're literally incentivising child sodding rapists.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, folks, the tributes are pouring in to the late Ann Widdecombe. I can't believe I'm saying that sentence. A legendary politician, public figure, national treasure, and very much a member of the Talk family. Joodles says, Mark, very sad news about Anne. She was an absolute warrior who took no jip from anyone. I certainly wouldn't have spent a second in Phil Potts' company, but she was fearless. A real loss, R.I.P. Anne. Amanda, what about this? Nigel Farage, the unprecedented witch hunt against Nigel and Reform UK will fail spectacularly. The British people have fair play in their blood and will vote against the establishment to get their voices heard. Well, let's get the views on that in the company of Steve N. Allen, comedian and broadcaster. Steve, what is your view of Nigel Farage's gamble in regard to this by-election in Clacton-on-Sea? Has he bitten off more than he can chew?
I don't think so, because I think if you game it out, most outcomes still end up being some form of a win. for Nigel Farage on this. Most of them are showing the signs that the establishment is overbearing. Some of the outcomes would be the establishment is weak. So it depends whether he wins or whether he loses. So when he originally came up with this plan, it looked fairly solid. One option could have been he wasn't allowed the by-election, or it was delayed until after the Parliamentary Standards report. Well, that's the establishment showing too much control. It could have been that everyone stood against it, or that only some stood against him. Some of the parties were stood down. Well, that would have shown that they're teaming up together. This is almost like that on steroids, that no one stands against him because there's nothing to win. I think it's a mixture of being afraid, but also realising what the gamble for the other parties. They don't win anything, but they can only lose ground. But by having a Count Binface and now all of the other interesting types, let's call them that, some bloke dressed as a fox is one of the other ones standing, isn't he? Which I did point out yesterday. I was talking to someone. If you've got a bloke dressed as a fox and a bloke dressed as a bin, it's going to be carnage. There's going to be food all over the place. You know what they're like.
Oh, most definitely. I mean, it's all the ribs strewn out on the pavement.
Now there's a guy called Mr. Fish Finger or something. He's literally going to be the thing that the fox eats out of the bin. It's terrible. But it's becoming a farce. But the problem is the establishment are taking it a little bit too seriously, aren't they? There never should have been a bit where anyone tried to even mention Count Binface. If you're Labour, if you're the Tories, you should have just ignored it. Because if you're going to try and make it look like an actual contender is Count Binface, you're making a mockery of democracy, and that shows that you're weak, because then you're the establishment making the wrong move. I can't believe they fell for it.
Most definitely. Let's talk now about our incoming Prime Minister, Andy Burnham. Over 300 MPs have backed him, so it's official. He will be our next Premier. Your reaction, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, look, it wouldn't be nice if we actually had a say. Yeah, as a voter, I quite like voting. It's one of the things we get to do. But it's the flaw in the system. We can't just blame Andy Burnham for this or the Labour Party, because I guess we had roughly the same when Liz Truss stood down and Rishi took over. There was no greater asking anyone. Even when you have things like Liz Truss taking over and you asked the Conservative members, that's not really a representative sample of the UK either, is it? Our system is thoroughly flawed because whenever people say there should be an election, a general election after a change of leader, or there shouldn't be, they're both right because of the mess we live in. We don't have a presidential system in theory, but of course we do. If it didn't make a difference when you changed leader to the kind of policies you'd get, they wouldn't change leader. Think of the different eras of Boris Johnson, Theresa May, Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak, all different phases that we didn't really get a say in when the changes happened. So we should always get to have a general election when a new Prime Minister steps in, which means we wouldn't get any extra general elections. The parties would not change leader because the one thing they don't want to do is ask us what we think of them. Well,
has Andy Burnham already started his premiership with a political masterstroke by not fielding a candidate in the Clacton-on-Sea by-election, which means it's really predominantly Farage versus Binface? Well, here is Andy Burnham on that very subject.
I promise you, I am not going to talk politics to you tonight, except to say this. Count Binface, you are carrying the hopes of the nation. Don't let us down.
I'm not going to be political, and then, whoops, I've been political. Steve, your reaction to that?
It's just such a stupid move. That's the thing I was just talking about. The actual parties really shouldn't be trying to make a guy with a bin on his head represent the establishment, because then you're handing such an easy win, such low-hanging fruit across to Nigel Farage. But he's doing the thing. Yeah, look, he gets a laugh in the room, and maybe he thought that clip wasn't going to leak, but it's just the dumbest move. Because then, even if you think that somehow Count Binface represents the establishment, what a terrible representation of it. A joke candidate who's obviously going to lose because the nutter vote will be split between him, the monster raving loonies, Mr. Fishfinger, and the Fox guy. So there's no way he's going to win. Don't put your colours to that mast, do you know what I mean?
Most definitely. Do you think that Nigel Farage wargamed the scenario in which the main parties would not field a candidate? Did he see that coming, Steve?
Yes, definitely, because then you get to say they're afraid and the establishment are ganging up to try and make this by-election not look like a by-election. It then becomes the people not getting a proper say versus the establishment. There are very few outcomes of all of this that look bad for Nigel Farage. Worst case scenario would be everyone stood a candidate and he lost. But then he could still reframe it that the establishment are the problem. At least he would be going to the people. You know what I mean? He could then come back in another area and stand as a man of the people in some other area. So look, I think he's he's got quite a good deal. I'm not really sure if there is an outcome that is truly bad for Nigel Farage here, because now he's got the by-election. Do you know what I mean? He's actually going and asking the people. Well, if there's a second by-election, then that might be different. If the standards, it's a big if, but if the standards committee want a punishment that's big enough to get enough suspension to then go for a recall notice, but then the people of Clacton would be like, we've just done this, mate. You're not paying attention to the news a few months ago. So even that problem disappears. I think it's really gamed out well.
Steve, how damaging has the story around a £5 million gift from a crypto billionaire been to the Farage brand? If he's exonerated by the palace authorities, is that the end of it? Or has it changed the public perception of man of the people, Nigel Farage?
Do you know, I'm not sure if it's those details of the story. It's been the response to it. I think we all understand he comes from a city background. He's got a bit of dosh. That's all right. As long as he's trying to represent the common person, they will forgive him. But what you expect is a bit of openness about this. You know that interview where he said, look, it's up to me what I do with the money. I could spend it on Ferraris if I want. That's honest. Why wasn't that the response right from the start? Why wasn't it, declare it if you want, and this is money that I get to do with whatever I want? So it's almost been the lack of transparency which doesn't sit well with the average person, I'd imagine. Like, you don't mind rich people having rich friends, but when it starts to get a bit tetchy, there's a lot of avoiding the question. Like the interview that Julia Hartley-Brewer did on this very network with him. And I imagine they're quite good friends. But she raised some very good questions that need answering. And instead of answering them, he's finding ways to not do. I think that's what the damage is being caused by.
You know, you're a miraculous man, Steve. You're very articulate. You're provably hilarious. You even charge for your hilarity. And the other remarkable feat you have, a little bit like Prince Andrew, is that during this heatwave, you don't appear to be sweating.
Well, that's because I was recently in a Pizza Express. No, wait a minute. No, that's because I use air conditioning, because that's the technological solution to our problems. And all of the people saying we shouldn't use it, you've lost the plot. The people who think like climate change is going to ruin all of our summers, but you can't use aircon. What are you doing? We've invented the technology. Don't sweat when you can have 20 degrees available to you. Oh, it's nice.
Have you got aircon at home?
Well, this is my garden room shed studio. I don't have walls like this in the actual main house. I don't have glowing
Can't
walls
believe it.
elsewhere
I thought your life was a TV show. Well, I'm impressed by that. And what about the World Cup, by the way? Has it captured you at all?
I'm not really into football, and as a stand-up comedian, you'll remember what it's like. My gig tomorrow has been cancelled because of the football, so already I'm as angry as a Moroccan.
And on that note, Steve, brilliant to have you on the show. Thank you for your reflections on the passing of Ann Widdecombe and all of your political insights. It's been a really interesting conversation today. Steve N. Allen, check out his excellent show on YouTube as well. Well worth watching. Very funny monologues. Ann Widdecombe, as the Prime Minister, Britain never had, but should have had. She would have been an incredible PM and would have gone down in history for it. R.I.P. Anne. How about this from Brad in Cambridge? Good afternoon, Mark. What a massive shock to learn of the passing of Ann Widdecombe. I had so much respect for that lady, her politics and her genuine faith. I can't tell you how much I will miss her. Chris says, Mark, on your show on Wednesday, she certainly went out with a bang. As always, spoke her mind, told it how it was. She will be sadly missed. There will never be another Ann Widdecombe. And let's take a voice note on that very subject from Sadia.
Since Margaret Thatcher, there hasn't been a formidable lady in politics such as Ann Widdecombe. She was only on earlier this week, and I watched her and listened the way she gave you a good ticking off. God bless her and let her soul rest in peace.
Oh, well, that was a wonderful voice note, Sadia. Thank you very much. And you're right, she gave bitten off more than he can chew in Clacton-on-Sea. 0344 499 1000. What do you think?
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hi, Mark, says Glyn, texting into the show. Can I just bring your attention to the deafening silence from Sadiq Khan et al. Over the football riots in London last night? Totally hypocritical. Well, you're absolutely right, because Morocco fans during the World Cup have been out rioting in France and in the UK, in London in particular, with a police officer being hospitalised, attacked with a glass bottle. This is an absolute disgrace. Nothing from the Mayor of London. All we've got is posts about global warming. It's the summer, Mayor Khan. The weather is nice. The sun is out. Get over it. But nothing, not a squeak over this police officer. It's really, really concerning. So riot police deployed to Edgware Road after an officer was struck in the head with the glass bottle. Riot police were deployed to central London last night after an officer was taken to hospital following clashes with Moroccan fans. After France beat Morocco 2-0 in the quarterfinals of the World Cup, crowds flowed onto Edgware Road, where some people set off fireworks and pelted officers with debris. Now, let's be clear that not only is Sadiq Khan deafening in his silence about this story, but so are the establishment media, particularly outlets like The Guardian newspaper. And be very clear, if this was England fans with the St George's flag, we wouldn't hear the end of it. And it would all be about these far-right thugs, wouldn't it? But of course, because it's a different protected group, we don't hear a thing. David Miliband eyes cabinet return as he backs Andy Burnham. David Miliband has given his backing to Andy Burnham's agenda in a speech that could set up a return to frontline politics. Now, this is more bad news for the country because it's another clapped-out ex-politician with no fresh ideas, wedded to the failed ideology of socialism. I'm genuinely worried about the Burnham premiership. Because if you look at our economy at the moment, we are absolutely struggling. We're the sick man of Europe. And I suspect that there's going to be some kind of economic crisis in the next 12 to 18 months. And under those circumstances, history teaches us that the worst thing you can have is a Labour government. More messages coming in regard to Ann Widdecombe. Pam says, good afternoon, Mark, on this very sad day. The tributes to Ann this morning have been memorable. I cannot believe we will no longer hear her views on the radio. She will be remembered for her speeches, for strict and for so much more. May she rest in peace and be long remembered. Pam, I totally agree. I think in the absence of figures like Ann Widdecombe, if there is a politician that is authentic and ideologically consistent, that is going to be their superpower. Because for so long now, we've had charlatans, people that just want the top job and will say anything to get that top job. And that was true of Boris Johnson. Let's not forget, by the way, yes, Boris Johnson got Brexit done, but this is the same Boris Johnson that on the eve of the Brexit vote wrote 2 articles for the Daily Telegraph, one in favour of Brexit, one against it. And he decided, he rolled the dice and made a calculation that was very political, that the Conservatives were going in that direction of Brexit, and therefore if he was going to become leader, he needed to be a Brexiteer. What about Keir Starmer? Has this guy got a single principle in his body? Has he got a single original idea? Does he stand for anything? Of course, after 2 years of a train wreck of a government, we know the answer to that one. Let's get reaction to all of the big stories of the day. Chief political writer at Spiked Online, Brendan O'Neill. Good morning, Brendan.
Hi, Mark. How's it going?
Really well. Lovely to have you on the show. Ann Widdecombe has died at the age of 78. Unexpected and very sad news. They don't make them like that anymore, do they?
Really sad news. I was talking to Anne in Makerfield just a couple of weeks ago. I was up there looking at the reform campaign and she was there too. She was giving a pep talk to all the people who were about to hit the streets and campaign for reform. She was full of life. She was, you know, she was like a tiny powerhouse of political spirit. She was really gearing the troops up and suggesting what they might say and telling them to really give it some welly. So I was really shocked when I saw the news this morning. You know, this is a woman who stood by her convictions, who was a passionate supporter of Brexit, who withstood all the mockery of the left to put forward her opinion. And you're right, they don't make them like her anymore.
No, and for example, she didn't leave the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party left her.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a story for a lot of people these days where, you know, sometimes they leave the Conservatives and go and join Reform, or they just leave politics altogether. And when I speak to people like that, they say, look, it wasn't me who changed, it was the Conservative Party who changed. And we know, I mean, I think the Conservative Party has improved under Kemi Badenoch. I think her leadership has much to recommend it. But we know there are huge swathes of the Conservative Party that are just wet. You know, they're basically Lib Dems in a nicer suit. You know, they're people who are against Brexit, who think that Nigel Farage is a lunatic. The Conservative Party has become very soft and wet, and in some cases a bit ridiculous. So it's not surprising that they lost important people like Ann Widdecombe over the years.
And it's my view that, Brendan, Anne's passing will be a loss to Reform UK. In some ways, she was the sort of spiritual flag bearer for that movement.
That's right. And people were really starstruck when they saw her in Makerfield. There was this kind of crowded room of lots of young people as well, in fact, who were about to go onto the streets and campaign. They were really starstruck when they saw her. You know, to these people, she was not only a politician, but also a celebrity. You know, she was frequently on reality TV shows and other entertainment programs. And she became a real standard bearer for the spirit of Brexit, I think. You know, not just Brexit itself, but the ideas behind it, the passion behind it, the notion that Britain should be a free, sovereign country beholden to no one else. She kind of embodied that fiery Britishness, and I think that will be missed.
Well, that's right, and I think she brought weight and pedigree to the Reform project, didn't she?
Oh yeah, absolutely, because she was in politics for so long. She's incredibly well known. She was basically a household name in this country. So she did bring a real moral, historical weight to the Reform project. And I think a lot of people in Reform will be very sad today. They'll miss her because she was an interesting, fun person, but they'll also miss her because she gave the party a bit of clout.
Yes, exactly. I can't think of a figure within the Reform movement that could possibly fill her shoes. Now, I want to ask you, Brendan, is Nigel Farage's decision to resign his Clacton-on-Sea seat a rare strategic misstep?
I don't know. I think it's too early to make that judgment. But I think, you know, I have to say that I think the behaviour of the other parties is abominable. I think their refusal to stand in Clacton is disgraceful. It is the duty of a party to stand in an election to try to win the support of their voters in that part of the country. And in unison, they've all backed out. You know, this is what people mean when they talk about the uniparty. They mean all the parties putting aside their differences and hunting in a pack against one other party that they have decreed to be evil and wrong. You know, the thing that's really getting on my wick at the moment, Mark, is this Count Binface stuff, because it looks like it's going to be Farage versus Count Binface, and all the usual suspects are just laughing their heads off. You know, all the centrist dads, all the turbo smug liberals, all the Ramonas on the internet, all the Radio 4 listeners. They think this is the funniest thing that's ever happened. They want Count Binface to win. They're going to throw their weight behind him. That's because they just don't give a toss about people in places like Clacton. Correct. They don't care what these people think. They don't care what these people want. They just want to use that part of the country as a stunt for their own pseudo-virtue. And I think that's really what's problematic here.
I completely agree. Speaking of problematic, a police officer is in hospital after clashes with Morocco fans in London. There's been big trouble in France as well, Brendan. And the mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, deafening in his silence on this story. And it's quite clear that if England fans had been involved in this kind of violence, we wouldn't hear the end of it.
Oh, I could not agree more. I was thinking the exact same thing today. If this had been a bunch of, you know, white Brits with sunburn and, you know, kind of tattoos.
With a can of lager in their hands.
Can of lager, absolutely.
God forbid that they should have the England flag on their apparel.
Exactly, waving the St. George's flag. I mean, it would be everywhere. People would be talking about fascism. They'd be saying, you know, these are the worst people in the country. The left would be talking about nothing else on social media. But because it's non-white people or people of Moroccan heritage, none of that's happening. It's seen as understandable or not necessarily a problem, just such two-tier morality. And we've had Morocco fans in Europe overnight saying victory to Hamas and saying Jews back to the gas, really chanting obnoxious Nazi-like slogans. Where is the left? Why is the left not condemning these open scenes of racism that rocked Europe over the past 24 hours? It's because they don't want to be seen to be judging non-white people. They are sacrificing the safety and security of Jews at the altar of identity politics, and that's unforgivable.
Most definitely. And I just wonder whether the trouble that we've seen in central London and the trouble that we've seen in France represents the failure of the multicultural experiment, Brendan.
Well, that's one of the reasons. In fact, that's the key reason people don't want to talk about this, because it's undeniable now that there are significant sections of our society who don't play by the rules, who are not well integrated, who don't see themselves as British or French or Dutch, who see themselves as foreign, who conceive of themselves as foreign, and even conceive of themselves as hostile to the countries in which they live, because they see a country like Britain as a white nation and a nation born in empire. They have this sense of hostility against us. It's undeniable now. There are large sections of our society who live in Britain but don't consider themselves in any meaningful way British. This is a real exposure, I think, of the ideology of multiculturalism and the fracture it has caused in our nations. And those scenes we can see in Edgware Road in London, that proves it.
It's a true scandal, and as you said, the usual suspects deafening in their silence. What do you make, Brendan, of the incoming Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, effectively saying that the UK government's response to the war in Gaza has been wrong?
I watched that message early today that he put out. It was so pious and so smug. And I just thought to myself, what's he playing at
So
here?
cynical.
So cynical and full of misinformation, in fact. He presents the war in Gaza as if, 7th of October was terrible, of course, but then Israel went insane and committed all sorts of war crimes. It's just not true. That's misinformation. Hamas was continuing its fight against Israel for the entire time, for the entire past 3 years. It fired missiles at Israel. It held people captive. It was shooting at IDF soldiers. This wasn't a genocide or a war crime. It was a war, and it was a war that Hamas started. But I think what Burnham is doing here, he is trying to appease the kind of progressive wing of the Labour Party, and he's trying to win back those kind of restive Muslim voters who've left Labour over the issue of Gaza and gone off to the Green Party or some other crackpot. That's what he's trying to do. He's sacrificing our historic friendship with the Jewish state in order to win back voters who turned their backs on Labour. He's putting his own self-interest above geopolitical interest. This is a really suicidally stupid position.
Most definitely. Brendan, lovely to speak to you this afternoon. Brendan O'Neill is the chief political writer at Spiked Online and the host of the hit YouTube show, The Brendan O'Neill Show, which I can highly recommend. What about Nigel? Has he bitten off more than he can chew? Is this a rare strategic misstep to resign his seat in Clacton-on-Sea, or is it a masterstroke? Because I don't know. So I need you to help me with that. I do not have the answer. I can't decide if it's a stroke of genius or a massive mistake. I just don't know. I do not know. So will you help me? Was this a good move? Was it a smart move to resign his seat? Two fingers to the establishment, or will it backfire? 0344 499 1000. Has Nigel Farage bitten off more than he can chew? Now, folks, you've probably noticed the 2026 World Cup is well and truly in full swing. We're making a massive month of football in style. That's right, we're going to mark it in style here at Talk. How would you feel about pocketing an amazing £26,000 completely tax-free? Just picture that heading straight into your bank account. 26 grand. You could sort the mortgage, take a proper holiday, or just take the pressure off for a bit. It is a life-changing sum. So if your balance needs a serious lift this summer, here is everything you need to know.
For your chance to win, visit talk.tv/win or text TALK to 8338 by 6 p.m. on the 20th of July 2026. Texts cost £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or send your name and number by post to Comp 1 PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by midnight on the 23rd of July 2026. 18 plus, UK residents only. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 8338 now. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talk.tv/win.
Labour, interestingly, saying they're considering an emergency law to deport that grooming gang leader. This is Shabir Ahmed, who served 14 years of his 22-year sentence for 30 child rape cases. He got less than 6 months. Basically, if you're going to be a child rapist, you know what, you may as well rape 40 instead of 1, because the sentence is basically the same. I mean, we're literally incentivising child sodding rapists.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
We bring you the sad news that Ann Widdecombe has passed, and it's a great loss to public life. She was a national treasure, a dear friend of mine, somebody that I always insisted on having on my show, whether I was on the telly, here, you name it. And lots of messages coming in thick and fast. Good afternoon, Mark. I shed a tear or two for Ann. This is Hev. She might have been lacking in height, but her personality was 10 foot tall. What a wonderful person in many ways. Massive brain power, and she was a whirlwind in politics. I will miss her advice and sensibility. My heart goes out to her family and friends. Rest, dear lady. Laura Jane is in Hampshire. Hi, Laura Jane.
Mark.
Lovely to have you on. And did you know Ann? Did you ever meet her?
Yes, my heroine. I met her. I went up to Makerfield to canvass, and we got off our coach, and she was getting off the Reform bus. And I thought, I know I'm doing what all the young do, but I'm jolly well going to get a photo with her. And she was incredibly kind. She's a fellow Roman Catholic, so we have that in common. And she couldn't have been nicer and kinder. And I was absolutely in awe. And that photo is going to be one of my treasures. Her and Shirley Williams, you're probably too young to remember who Shirley Williams is.
Of course I do. Great figure on the left.
They were great figures, both of them, and they had the same kind of indefatigable personalities, political, they stuck to whatever they believed in.
Would you go for Barbara Castle as well?
Different kind of personality Shirley Williams, and they were very, very cultured and well read. Her mother, Shirley Williams' mother, wrote Testament of Youth, which was all about nursing in the First World War. I think Anne and Shirley Williams, Barbara Castle, were on a different sort of plane in terms of their intellect and their culture. But having said that, she was on your radio. I heard her on the radio giving you a hard time.
Oh, yes.
And you were asking her a sort of slight tongue-in-cheek. You were playing devil's advocate. She was not having any of it, and she gave you as good as she, And
oh, yes.
It shows you there are no politicians like that anymore who stand up for what is right. A lot of her her views on abortion and various other things were unpopular with people who aren't necessarily very strong Roman Catholic. And I definitely will be saying Mass for the repose of her soul on Sunday, and for the loss of her indefatigable personality. So rest in peace.
Most definitely. There was no greater pleasure, Laura Jane, than a handbagging from Ann Widdecombe. And I'd known her for so long, and I did enjoy winding her up a bit, and she knew that I was winding her up a bit. And notwithstanding that, she won every single duel, because you'd have to wake up pretty early in the morning to get past Ann Widdecombe. I never managed it. I believe it's my understanding, LJ, that she converted from Anglicanism to Roman Catholicism in 1993 after the Church of England decided to ordain women as priests. There are parallels there with her political journey, that she didn't change, but the Anglican Church did. Same with the Tory party moving to reform.
Yes, and very often with converts, they are even stronger than those of us who were born Catholic. And I think that, that is very much like her political career. She wasn't going to change, and she saw that the Conservatives had changed. So she moved where she felt her political new home was going to be. And she stuck to her guns. And I'm afraid, not particularly keen on what Henry VIII did, and I'm not particularly keen on female. Anyway, that's another story, and I'm not going to sully her memory with my own church views on female archbishops of Canterbury and such like. But,
of course. And now, Laura Jane, it's my understanding that you are a very active Reform UK supporter and that you've worked with the party campaigning. Is that right?
Yes, since the Brexit. My goddaughter ran his campaign. I've never forgotten it. She came and found us and said, "This man interviewed me in a pub. I've got my first job." And we said, "Who?" She said, "A fellow called Nigel Farage." I nearly fell off my chair laughing so much. I said, "You do know who you're about to work for." Anyway.
Well, that's something. And that's a lovely story. And Laura Jane, in a moment, I'm going to ask you about the Clacton-on-Sea by-election. But I do believe that Anne will be a great loss to the Reform project, because she had weight, she had pedigree, she brought a sort of authority to Reform UK that perhaps they're going to have trouble replacing.
Yes, in one word, yes. She does. She brought great gravitas, and I'm sure she gave Nigel and people behind the scenes a handbagging too. She will have stuck to her guns on things, and I think they will miss that, that historical political figure who goes back even further than Nigel. I mean, she was born in 1947 after all, but she will be missed.
Yes, because if you think about the other key figures in Reform, they're relatively modern faces on the political scene. I mean, Nigel has been campaigning for decades, but really someone like Anne, she's been there, she's got the T-shirt, she served in a Conservative government. So, many people, Laura Jane, compare her a little bit to Margaret Thatcher. Is that appropriate?
Yes, I mean, there were those great figures in political history, which is why I bring up somebody like Shirley Williams, because they were standouts in their field. They didn't, they didn't go against what they believed in. And I think Anne's upbringing, as well as Shirley Williams, they were brought up to believe in their country and to believe in the respect and the morals that go along with that. And, Margaret Thatcher, after all, similarly, her father was he was a mayor, he was a councillor, etc., and they were brought up with very different values from the young politicians nowadays, who are basically career politicians, let's face it.
Most definitely. And Laura Jane, before we let you run, what do you make of Nigel Farage's gamble to resign his seat? Has he bitten off more than he can chew?
Well, I watched his speech. I was absolutely terrified that he was going to resign. I was sitting here biting my nails, and I I took a deep intake of breath because I thought, oh, Lord, what has he done? And then next day when we heard that the others weren't running, and I thought, oh, Lord, what has he done? But actually, it highlights a bit like what Anne stood for. He has decided to take on the establishment and to put us, the people, first. And that is clearly something that the other parties are not doing. They just want to show him up. I think it's not going to be easy because Count Binface, etc., and all of that. The newspapers, media are going to go on and on about that. I think we have to be careful. I'm not lecturing you at talk, but I think we have to be careful not to bring that in. I hope Julia's listening because I really do not want her to tell me one more time that she doesn't agree with certain things that I think. I do think this is a conspiracy theory. I'm sorry.
Well, share it. What do you think? Because no one gets censored on my watch.
Well, I mean, I'm considered pretty eccentric in my family for my political views. I mean, they think I'm absolutely dotty. As I've mentioned before, I have had some Conservative prime ministers way back when and in my family. And I think that they are terrified of the fact that, he does things his way, love it or loathe him. He does things his way. But what he does is he sees what the mood of the people is, versus what the mood... Cromwell did the same thing. I know he didn't exactly end well either, but he saw what the mood was. And I think that we have a similar sort of rebellion going on, and they want to quash it, come what may. And I think that they're doing everything. I mean, I do believe that the parliamentary inquiry is going to be a complete stitch up because, after all, when we haven't got a single representative on there that it isn't going to be. I think that the police inquiry, all of these things, Alex brought it up, the inquiry, the police inquiry. I mean, I could ring up and say that I believe you, Mark Dolan, has done something illegal. The banks are absolutely hot on all these things.
Yeah.
It's a stitch up.
Well, Laura Jane, thank you for that. And I will say that this parliamentary investigation into the receipt by Nigel Farage of £5 million from a crypto billionaire, it's ultimately going to be he said, she said, and a judgment will be made by the authorities in regard to Nigel Farage. It won't be evidence, it won't be facts, and I think that's problematic. Here's a voice note from Stuart.
Is it legal to actually stand up there covering your face like that? Seems really weird in this day and age with security and everything else going on. I think you should be unmasked. It does make a mockery of the whole thing.
Well, I think it's a fair point. Listen, I need your help, folks, because I cannot decide whether it's a masterstroke or a mistake by Farage to resign his seat. I just don't know. I haven't made my mind up, so can you help me? 0344 499 1000. A big hour to come. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
2 minutes past 2, Mark Dolan here on Talk, in for the brilliant Ian Collins. And it's a very sad day today. We come to terms with the passing of Ann Widdecombe, a formidable figure in British public life. We'll be looking back at her amazing career and her amazing life. Ann was very much a member of the Talk family and enhanced this network whenever she appeared on it. And I had the great honour of hosting her final interview here on Talk on Wednesday. She was as formidable and entertaining as ever. But her passing raises quite a simple question this afternoon, which is authentic, principled politicians. Are they a thing of the past? Meanwhile, a police officer is hospitalised after being attacked with a bottle by a Moroccan fan. All the usual suspects, including the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, deafening in their silence. It's quite clear if it was England fans, you'd never hear the end of it. Does this demonstrate the failure of the multicultural experiment? There's been trouble in London from Morocco fans, and the same in France as well. And of course, notwithstanding the arrival of a new Prime Minister in number 10, the other big political story of the year is Nigel Farage's decision to resign his seat of Clacton-on-Sea, sparking a by-election. Has this been a masterstroke? Is it a stroke of genius, or will it backfire? Has Nigel Farage bitten off more than he can chew? I don't know. I haven't made my mind up. I'm torn. I'm very 50-50 on this. So I need your help. I need you to help me. Was it a smart move? Will it backfire? Has he bitten off more than he can chew? Will he have the last laugh? 03444991000. Yana is taking your calls. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Leave us a voice note. We love a voice note. Let's talk. Now, let's react to the very sad news of the passing of Ann Widdecombe. I'm delighted to welcome Adam Newton, who is a former aide to Ann. Good afternoon, Adam.
Hi, Mark. Nice to be here.
I'm so happy that you're on the show, but of course, under such sad circumstances, I never needed, Adam, an excuse to get Ann on the show because she was always authentic, brave, articulate, funny, entertaining. She was one of a kind, wasn't she?
Absolutely, and she did that from a political career lasting 30 years inside the House of Commons, and then in retirement continuing to speak up trenchantly as she did on all issues that she cared about, from issues relating to criminal justice on the one hand to protection of animals. I saw her there with the donkeys being led up the street. That was kind of classic Ann on the other. So yes, she was certainly a celebrity turn and good for quotes, comments and colour.
She was a former Anglican who left the church because they began ordaining female priests. She was a lifelong Conservative who left the party because they were making a mess of Brexit and they had shifted leftwards. She described the Tory party to me a couple of years ago on air as institutionally woke. These institutions, they left Ann, she didn't leave them.
I think that's true. I mean, I suspect if you'd had, Ann Widdecombe 30 years ago, 20 years ago on the TV, you'd have found a very similar set of views. She was robustly and unwaveringly in favour of certain things and against others. And remarkably, in a way, that led to an appeal which was actually beyond the traditional constituency of people who you would say were traditionalist, sort of right-wing Conservatives. And, and I think that the sort of sad passing of Ann, and we remember a few conviction politicians of her like. She was often mistaken for Mo Mowlam in the days when I was working for her, and you sort of see quite a similar approach to speaking her version of the truth and recognising, without sort of compromising the position that she had, that not everybody agreed with her.
She was a highly respected local constituency MP, devoted to the needs and concerns and interests of her constituents. What about her stint in the Home Office as a Home Office Minister? Was that a successful time for Ann, Adam?
I worked for her in opposition, so after the time where she'd been working in government. But I think people would recognise that she had an interesting juxtaposition of views. She was very tough on crime, to use that phrase, but actually had quite liberal views when it came to reforming prisons and looking at ways in which
she believed in rehabilitation, didn't she?
She absolutely did, and I think fought probably until her dying day to see prisons reformed in a way that meant that prisoners actually spent time working inside prisons so that they might return to life outside prison one day with more meaningful skills and activities. Is not something which was desperately popular. It wasn't a Tory vote winner, and yet it was something that she fervently campaigned for throughout her life.
Fiery and formidable on air and in the House of Commons. What about the Ann Widdecombe that you knew, Adam? Ann Widdecombe, the human being?
A lot of people will be surprised to hear, unless they had the opportunity to meet her, that she was an incredibly warm, at times very funny and very personable individual. I remember the number of times that our trips around the country to either party events or on specific policy engagements would get derailed because individuals who particularly needed the help of somebody were in a place of personal crisis in that moment would sort of come up to her and start to unburden themselves. And Anne would typically want to take those cases on. I mean, we have literally missed planes and trains as a result of trying to help out people in need. On a personal level, yeah, warm, engaging, funny, argumentative, a lot of what you do see on the kind of the public side, but then also that side that came out much more as she engaged in reality TV later on in her life.
And she wasn't cynical. She wasn't a political grifter. She reached very sort of high levels within politics on merit alone.
Yes, I think that's right. I mean, I think after the 97 election, when Tony Blair won the first term for New Labour, there were very few people you could point to as being as opposite to everything that New Labour stood for as Ann Widdecombe. And I think that was the reason why William Hague put her into the shadow cabinet when he did, and why she was popular. It would certainly not work to have an entire party made up of Ann Widdecombe's, but the necessity of having somebody who spoke a version of the truth and did not compromise on that version of the truth, I think was important in terms of helping to shape a battle of ideas, even though, there are many issues in which I myself didn't agree with her.
Only days ago on air, Anne called me a very silly man and be quiet and let me finish my point, which was, there's no greater pleasure than a handbagging from Ann Widdecombe, and I'm going to miss it hugely. Did you have any run-ins with Anne, Adam?
Oh, plenty. I think the few mentions I get in her own memoirs, she refers to me as somebody who constantly argued with her, but she didn't listen to. Remembering how much she was a fan of animals, I was sort of thinking about her a little bit like a spaniel, utterly determined, very clear in the direction she wanted to go by instinct, selective hearing, to say the least. And one thing that people won't know a great deal about Ann Widdecombe was her love of water, and the fact that she was always trying to sort of go off swimming when we were trying to organise events anywhere near the coast. I think the first thing she did on retirement was have a swimming pool dug in her new home in Dartmoor, which she was very, very proud of.
Now, I'm heartbroken, Adam, that we've lost her so young. There was so much living to do and such a contribution to make. That said, she went out at the height of her powers.
I think at whatever point Anne had decided to sort of step away, whether it was from Parliament or her very public exits from reality TV shows, she left a very indelible mark on things. That was her style.
Adam, I'm absolutely certain it's a tough day for you, and I'm so grateful that you've joined us to reflect on the memory of a truly special lady, a wonderful lady, Ann Widdecombe. Adam Newton was a former aide to Anne. Sir Bill Cash is, of course, a former Conservative MP, former chairman of the European Scrutiny Committee and, of course, robust Brexiteer. Good afternoon, Sir Bill.
Mark, hello. Good to speak to you again.
A wonderful Conservative and a true Brexiteer to her core. Ann Widdecombe will be deeply missed.
Absolutely. She was quite remarkable. I think that many people, when under attack from her, would be very worried that she was going to score every single time.
Oh, yeah.
The only thing I would say is that she did start off with John Major, and she was a minister under him, which is often regarded by Eurosceptics as a rather improbable situation. Having said that, however, I do think that she was a kind of, and I don't mean this in any way disrespectfully, because I really rather loved her. She was a bit of a Margaret Rutherford figure. She was incredibly strong-minded. She had a very, very deep moral and social sense. She was a Catholic, as I am, and I can only say that I believe that she was completely and totally committed to her moral values. Not very nuanced, I would say, in some of the things that she said and some of the attitudes she took, but she was a very, very good person. She wanted to do good. I was very intrigued that she became an independent after she'd been in the Brexit Party, because that's quite a statement from her. I think she'd really probably shifted her ground quite considerably to become an independent in the last couple of years.
You mentioned Margaret Rutherford, who was a celebrated British character actress who was known for her eccentric, formidable comic performances. And you're right about the parallels. Does that mean, therefore, Sir Bill, that some people underestimated Anne, that she might have been an underrated political figure?
Well, not by Michael Howard, I don't think, because I think the most famous thing that she's known to have said was there was something of the night about him at a very crucial moment in relation to prison reform. And I think that's really came as a kind of lethal weapon, if I could put it that way around, at that point in time. But she spoke an enormous amount of sense. She did speak as she thought, and she had enormous conviction. I personally think she had great moral stature as well. And some people will disagree with some of the things that she said and some of the things she voted for. But she spoke her mind, and I always thought that anybody just looking at her on the screen now, listening to this withering attack, and I don't know quite what she's talking about, Brexit. But God help the person who's at the other end of the receiving.
Most definitely. And do you think that Anne deserved more political opportunities than she received? Might she have been a successful cabinet minister or even leader of the party?
I'm not sure she would have ever been leader of the party, but I do think that she did actually become Shadow Secretary of State, under William Hague.
Shadow Home Secretary, right, yeah.
Yes, I think that's right. And I think she was on the brink there of a significant breakthrough. But I think she became very disillusioned with, as many of us did, with that particular phase where, it was, we want our country back, but we're not actually going to give it to you if you really want the truth, because that was really part of the problem which I was up against, which is that on the issue of sovereignty, where I'm sure she agreed with me 100%, you can't divide sovereignty up into parcels. And there has been this constant problem within the Conservative Party, which I think is now being resolved, which is basically you can't be both a Remainer and a Eurosceptic at the same time. And she certainly understood that.
And, Sir Bill, you will likely agree with me that the Tories prevaricated over Brexit for so long. And, of course, Theresa May was the Prime Minister that was trying to get that deal across the line. She was a Remainer herself. And we know about the shift leftwards of the party in recent years, which is why Anne left. Was she a canary in the coal mine for the Conservative Party, given her departure?
Well, I have much more faith in the Conservative Party. I haven't left the Conservative Party, and I've no intention whatsoever of doing so. And I have issued some warnings, if I may, about the question of being strident in views, but not actually having delivered them yourself, as indeed I think Nigel Farage is now experiencing. It's one thing to say what you like to say, to get campaigning going and to harvest votes. But when it comes to actually doing it, it is more complicated. I take the view that you have to be both consistent and principled. You have to stick to your guns, and you actually also, like Anne, have to speak out your mind completely clearly so that nobody is under any misapprehension that sovereignty and the British people comes first, but you have to deliver it in Parliament. It's not enough just to campaign from outside.
Did it surprise you that she hitched her wagon to the Reform UK project, Bill?
Yes, I think it did, because I think she was an innate conservative. I think there was an element of frustration about it from her point of view. I haven't experienced that as such. But of course, I have been very critical. I don't think there are many people who voted against the three-line whip more than I have in the Conservative Party on these issues. But she really did get very frustrated. And I think that her going to Reform and to the Brexit Party, but then becoming an independent towards the very end in 21-23, I think that's a very interesting shift. And I think a lot of attention has been lost on that. I think that people ought to really look at why she did that.
Sir Bill, I'm so grateful for your time. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. Another politics legend, be clear about that. Sir Bill Cash, one of the founding fathers of Brexit, revered Eurosceptic and former Conservative MP. Thank you, Bill. Your memories of Ann Widdecombe, 0344 499 1000. And folks, I need your help this afternoon because I cannot decide whether it's been a masterstroke or a mistake by Farage to resign his seat in Clacton-on-Sea. Well, I spoke to Ann Widdecombe about this on Wednesday when she was as formidable and feisty as ever on Talk Breakfast, and she was four square behind Nigel's decision to resign the seat. She said it was a great move, but what do you think? Will it backfire? Was it the right thing to do? Help me on this one, 0344 499 1000. Paul says, Mark, Nigel Farage has just proven to Britain that the Labour, Conservative and Lib Dem parties have no interest in the political process of the country, that they're all interested in themselves. Starmer is giving our country away and Burnham is going to gift wrap it. Keep those views coming. What do you think, masterstroke or big mistake, Nigel Farage? Has he bitten off more than he can chew? 2:19, this is Talk.
Labour initially saying they're considering an emergency law to deport that grooming gang leader. This is Shabir Ahmed, who served 14 years of his 22-year sentence for 30 child rape cases. He got less than 6 months. Basically, if you're going to be a child rapist, you know what, you may as well rape 40 instead of 1, because the sentence is basically the same. I mean, we're literally incentivising child sodding rapists.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Will Nigel Farage's political gamble backfire? I'll be taking your calls in just a few minutes' time. This from Jim. Good afternoon, Mark. Jim here in the Netherlands, having spent most of today listening to talk radio and some great calls. I feel that most people are missing the important point of all of this. Forget Farage's timing. This is a perfect example of how to outwit the witless. Just contemplate how Nigel, when confronted with the prospect of having his family being in the spotlight, perhaps even being harassed, acted like any outraged father would, lashing out. And to me, it's a perfect example of human fatherly love. Thank you for that, Jim. Keep those views coming. Now, riot police were deployed to central London yesterday evening after an officer was taken to hospital following clashes with Morocco fans after France beat Morocco 2-0 in the quarterfinals of the World Cup. Crowds flowed onto Edgware Road in central London, where some people set off fireworks and pelted officers with debris. An officer was seriously injured after being hit over the head with a glass bottle. Well, we've seen similar such trouble in France overnight. Let's get reaction from the brilliant journalist at The Spectator magazine, Gavin Mortimer, who's written a piece which I would highly recommend, headlined "North African Hooligans Are the New Football Firm." Hi, Gavin.
Good afternoon, Mark.
Congratulations on this important article. What is the main thrust of it?
Well, it's that in the 1980s, I think you and I are the same generation. We remember that every England game was, we would see disgraceful scenes of English fans rioting, hooliganism. And 10 years ago, that's died out. It was known as the English disease. 10 years ago at the 2016 Euros, it was Russian fans who were causing the trouble in Marseille, some violent scenes with ambushing England supporters. And it just seems that in the last 2 or 3 years, it's changed hooliganism, and it's now really become embraced by North African fans, be they Egyptian. It was Egyptian fans rioting in London last week. Morocco fans yesterday. France has had several violent riots involving Algerian fans in the last 3 or 4 years. And what's curious about so many of these incidents, Mark, is that the flag that they carry isn't a Moroccan flag or an Algerian flag. It's a Palestinian flag.
Well, that's exactly right. Gavin, can we learn anything from what's happening across Europe in regard to these ethnic groups causing trouble? Does it cast doubt on the success of the multicultural experiment?
Well, I think it does. It's multi-conflictual. That's what the French call this now. It's become very tribal, and it happens time and again. Last month in Paris, there was a night of very violent rioting after the Paris Saint-Germain beat Arsenal to win the Champions League. The same thing happened in 2025, and it just reflects, I think, the utter failure of multiculturalism, the celebrating diversity. This hasn't worked at all. It's diverse rioting that we're seeing after every football match, and it's deeply worrying, and the politicians have got no answer to it.
No, because you have these parallel communities that exist in isolation, independent of the kind of host culture of the country, and there is an ideology that underpins it, cultures, customs, and sometimes it spills over into violence. And of course, we've seen that, haven't we, following the October the 7th attacks in Israel?
Well, I think that's right. It's definitely intensified this the North African football hooliganism since then. And as I said, Palestine seems to be at the heart of this. There were some very disturbing reports this morning from The Hague in Holland, where apparently, allegedly, Moroccan fans were chanting death to the Jews, and they're anti-Semitic.
That doesn't have anything to do with football, does it?
It doesn't have anything to do with football. And a very important point to make, Mark, is that there's never any trouble from Moroccan fans in Morocco. They would not dare incur the wrath of the Moroccan security police. Similarly, in Egypt, you're not going to mess with the Egyptian police. And yet, and again, they haven't gone, these fans, to America to cause trouble. The Moroccans have behaved impeccably in America. It's only in Europe, in Western Europe, whether it's Brussels or Amsterdam or Paris or London, that they feel this need to riot, and it's a way of flexing their where they call it the Ummah, the Muslim identity, saying we're here, we don't want to be part of your society, this is our society.
And it's a portent of things to come, isn't it, Gavin? These awful scenes of violence are not going to be isolated and could at some point be on a bigger scale.
Well, I think that's right. I think, as you said, Mark, it's not just football. We see them with these anti-Semitic marches through London and Paris and other European cities since October 7th, 2023. And they're here to stay. And of course, what we're beginning to see now is the backlash from the indigenous population, whether it's in England or France, in Germany, Holland, and it really does. The omens are not good.
And of course, they're going to be labelled far right, and they'll be called divisive by figures like Keir Starmer or perhaps Andy Burnham.
Well, it's interesting to see that whenever quite rightly, when the English fans went on the rampage 40 years ago, they were widely condemned by politicians, by everyone. We don't see that now. There were one or two minor incidents. I don't think hospitalising a policeman is a minor incident.
No, and therefore there are quarters of the press that have been deafening in their silence, as has the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, Gavin, who's been posting about the hot weather and nothing besides.
No, that's a surprise, isn't it? He's just got his head in the sand. So as the socialist mayor of Paris, they just refuse to see what's there before them because they're terrified. They're terrified that this is, and it's interesting to see Andy Burnham today saying these about his Gaza comments, because he's terrified that he does not want to get the this violent minority element of a Muslim population against him, because they are very quick to express their outrage on the streets. We see it time and again, and that's why I think there's cause to be deeply pessimistic about the future.
And as we've said, it's not about the football. The football is a symptom, isn't it? It's a diagnostic. It's a red flag. What we're seeing in London, in Paris and elsewhere is political, cultural and religious extremism. And as you said, the authorities in the West turning a blind eye, effectively enabling this.
Well, indeed, and also with the likes of Andy Burnham and the far left in France, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, their constant anti-Western rhetoric only emboldens these people. It's what we see, what the French call the green and the red alliance. So the red as in the left, the green as in the Islamist extremists, and together they hate the West. And this is what this is, as you said, it's not really much to do with football. It's any excuse to attack the police and just to express their contempt for their host society, for Western culture.
And there are figures on the woke progressive left who are fanning the fires of this problem, aren't they? Do you remember that footage a few months ago, Gavin, of a pro-Palestine march that was pretty nasty, pretty toxic, and there was a person just there, a bit of a political activist on the left, who said to these pro-Palestinian thugs, calm down, mate, I'm on your side. And the guy's response was, no, you're not.
No, this is it. I mean, this is the reality. And
the progressive left are the useful idiots of these extremists.
Well, absolutely, and they're cowards too. They're moral cowards, because anyone with any honesty and courage knows that we've got a real problem on our hands, and they refuse. François Hollande, the former president of France, said 10 years ago that we're seeing the partition of French society. These were private comments linked to the press. He knows what's going on, and yet publicly he always talks about diversity is our strength. They just parrot these lines because they haven't got the courage to confront the truth.
No, and Gavin, we are of a similar vintage, although I'll say you're ageing far better than I am. And I just want to reflect briefly before we let you go on where we go from here. And my position is that the United Kingdom is an amazing country, and it is a successful multi-ethnic society, and that's not going to change. The UK is not going to cease to be a multi-ethnic society, and in fact it has been since you and I were young lads. But what's happened in recent years is something quite different.
Oh, it is, absolutely. I grew up in North London, and I went to my school that I went to was wonderfully diverse. Everyone got on along very well. There was none of this tribalism that we see today, and it's really accelerated in the last 10 years, partly because of mass immigration, that the numbers coming in now are so great. They make no attempt to integrate. And also, as you've said, Mark, because of the progressive left who are fueling the flames of this anti-Western rhetoric. And I'd love to be optimistic and end this Friday afternoon on an upbeat note, but I can't be optimistic because I see this situation only getting worse in France, in Britain, across Western Europe.
Are we done for? Can the genie go back in the bottle? Is there any way? Are there any levers that can now be pulled, Gavin?
If a very courageous politician comes to power and has power, in France, I'm talking perhaps about Marine Le Pen and Jordan Bardella, and actually stopping immigration, changing the constitution, and perhaps deporting those people who are here illegally, who have broken the law. Only by doing that can we turn things around. If we don't do that, if we don't have any courageous politicians, I'm afraid we're doomed.
Gavin, it's been brilliant to talk to you. Congratulations on a compelling and a very important article in The Spectator. I'd really recommend it, folks. You might be able to get it as a free sample article, but it's worth the subscription. The title of Gavin's article is North African Hooligans Are the New Football Firm, with his concerns that this goes far beyond 11 men kicking a football about. This is societal, this is cultural. My thanks to Gavin Mortimer. Nigel Farage, has he bitten off more than he can chew? This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, folks, congratulations, because we're going to have a new Prime Minister probably on the 20th of July, given that over 300 Labour MPs have now backed the former Manchester Mayor. Let's get reaction from a very old friend of mine. We always love chatting to him. He's James Matthewson, former Labour Party spokesman and political commentator. Hi, James.
Hello, Mark.
Listen, you want this Labour government to be very successful. I think that, like me, you're concerned about how things have been going over the last couple of years. Can Andy Burnham fix it?
I hope so, Mark. I really do. But you know what the dangerous thing in politics is? People put their faith in one figure, you know, like a messiah. And the people who I've seen put their faith in Andy Burnham, you know, I'd love to join them. I'd love to join the hype, but I've been burned too many times, you know, by politicians. We all have. And I think what you see, you know, the patterns repeat where everyone wants someone to come along and just fix all their problems. And it doesn't work like that. And the people that I'm seeing united, I can't decide whether it's very impressive or very worrying, because what you've got is you know, people from John McDonnell on the left of the party, right? People remember as Corbyn's chancellor, and people like Douglas Alexander and people like Wes Streeton, all coming together to support Andy Burnham. Now, look, that's either a very good thing or a recipe for disaster, because as soon as you get into the hard policy details, potentially what you'll see happen is a break with those people. And if they break and they all collapse underneath Andy Burnham, then he will have no leg to stand on. So, I'm cautiously optimistic, but also, I'm a bit anxious.
Most definitely. And James, not only are you a former Labour Party spokesperson, political broadcaster, you're a keen student of political history. Where do you stand on politicians going on a journey, given that Andy Burnham was a fully paid-up member of the New Labour project back in the day?
Look, I think we all change as people. We want our politicians to be people, don't we? We reinvent ourselves all the time, Mark. Listen, I first saw you, Mark, on Balls of Steel as a comic inspiration to me and my friends as teenagers.
God bless you.
We
And then you're like, what happened to Dolan? What went wrong?
What? When did he become this right-wing talking head that I need to spar with all the time? But at the end of the day, we all reinvent ourselves, we change, we develop. That's life. But we should see that from our politicians as well. The good thing with Andy Burnham is that he's gone and seemed to learn the lessons other politicians haven't around how you communicate, the things that people want to see. And look, he's never going to be to everyone's taste. He is of the left broadly, probably very centre left, but still of the left. So he's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but at the end of the day, I think the guy stands a very good chance at trying to reinvent the Labour Party, trying to make it relevant to the 21st century as well, hopefully.
And you know as well as I do that one of the main reasons why the Labour Party exists is to invest in public services and to tackle inequality. That's going to be difficult given the perilous state of the nation's finances, isn't it?
Yeah, it's no easy task, absolutely. And who he appoints as Chancellor will be crucial in that, Mark, absolutely. But, I haven't got time to be worrying about this. When I look at the right and I see people like Rupert Lowe on Joe Rogan's podcast spouting absolute nonsense. I see Nigel Farage. And, Mark, I'll always hold you to account on this. You've been singing this man's praises, Nigel Farage, for years. And he's been proven charlatan. Look at this stunt now where he's going to be back in, he's going to be fighting a bin, for a contest that he didn't need to have. So the challenge on the right needs to be taken on, but I want to see it done properly, and I want to see it done by somebody who believes in his convictions, but also can communicate with the country, because we can't go down that path of division any longer. It's done America no good, and it will do us no good in the long run.
Well, I'm not allied to any political party or project, but I speak admiringly of Nigel Farage because he was very early on illegal immigration. 10 years ago, he was at Dover pointing out the great crime of illegal immigration. They called him crazy, except now that has changed the whole conversation and the entire political establishment realised that it's unacceptable. He was early with calling out net zero, which is the effective deindustrialisation of the country, a view shared by the left-wing Labour unions. He's been very clear that Britain lives beyond its means and he's supporting alarm clock Britain. Hard to disagree with any of that, isn't it?
The thing is, Mark, right, well, especially when it comes to issues of immigration, Farage is an opportunist. We've seen this with the financial situations surrounding him at the moment, that maelstrom of money that seems to be coming to this man. He is not a successful business person. He's not an entrepreneur. He's not somebody who has made money because of his own ingenuity. He has traded power and access to power for financial support. And I'm just seeing this, the allegations around George Cotterill's mother now, the money that is surrounding these people, when they then decide to talk about deregulating cryptocurrency, they decide to talk about stripping back workers' rights. Why? Because they are in the pockets of the bosses, and in many cases themselves, they are the bosses, Mark. So when we talk about actually trying to make Britain fairer, trying to make Britain better, I think we all want the same thing at the end of the day. Nigel Farage is the opposite of the solution to that. I'm not saying Andy Burnham is, but Farage definitely isn't.
Well, Nigel Farage, we can agree, most definitely has questions to answer about his relationship with Posh George and that receipt of £5 million from a Thai-based crypto billionaire.
Mark, you were calling for Starmer to be dragged over the coals over a pair of free glasses, man. And now you've got Farage, who you have really, really sung the praises of, told people that he's, anti-establishment. There is nothing more establishment than the money that is behind Farage and the things that he has done. He is the political establishment. And the sooner that people wake up and realise it, the better.
I think he's the nemesis of the establishment, given the fact that he's the reason why Brexit happened, why he is the man who, if he becomes Prime Minister, will scrap net zero and break up this social democratic model of a cult of welfareism with a country that lives beyond its means. He's going to tear up that whole consensus.
It's not, Mark. Come on. At the end of the day, right, we built welfare to help people in this country. We support workers' rights. We fight for social liberties like women's rights, gay rights, transgender rights. And all that you have done is bash those things and support people like Farage, who is the establishment. He is the political establishment. The money that bankrolls him, the things that he's doing for them in exchange for that money that we need the answers on. And yet the man can't take a single bit of scrutiny, so he has to call a by-election so he can stand against a man dressed as a bin. Come on, Mark, you're better than this.
How is masterminding Brexit an establishment move?
Because it benefited his financial backers and all those people who supported and seek to benefit from Brexit and who have made money from Brexit. You know who hasn't made money from Brexit? The people in the council estates that Farage
So why do so many people support Reform UK? Why do so many people support Reform UK?
Because
Have they been brainwashed?
Because the political establishment for so long has taken them for granted, Mark. That's something we can agree on. But what I will tell you is...
That doesn't answer my question. Why do viewers and listeners to this show, like Nigel Farage and like Reform, why are they going to vote for them?
One of two reasons, either because they share a broadly right-wing view of the world, right, which is their right. This is democracy. I want pluralistic society. They can vote for that. But I think the majority of them want to see change from the status quo. And Farage, for a long time, was the only person saying that he would change things. Now, if you think he's going to change things in the direction that helps workers, you know, in working class communities in the Northeast, where I'm from, you've got another thing coming. What we need is real change. Hopefully Burnham can get a grip of that. I'm nervous about it. I'm anxious about it. But if he does, then he can deal with the scourge of Farage once and for all.
So with regard to workers' rights, it's interesting that you've raised that, and I'm curious to see where Andy Burnham is going to take the economy and what his business policies will be when he's Prime Minister. But do you think that improving workers' rights, which of course was the brainchild of Angela Rayner, were worth it, given that they've caused more unemployment? And do you think that the national insurance tax rate was worth it, given that it has shrunk the economy?
Well, we see this time and time again, Mark. The opposition to expanding any kind of rights for anyone is the idea that it's going to cause damage in the long term. When Labour
hasn't it?
When it first
unemployment's gone up because of the workers' rights.
The national minimum wage, do you remember the outcry? Apparently people would never work again. There would be no businesses that could run. Expanding things, driving progress takes sacrifice. Of course it does. There will be knocks. There will be challenges to that. But doing the right thing, I thought that's what we're about in this country. I thought we are meant to be about trying to drive change and progress for everyone. Because right now, unfortunately, the whip hand is still held by bosses and employers.
What is the point in having better workers' rights if it causes more unemployment?
Because that's the threat that's always held over workers.
Well, it's not the threat. Unemployment's going up, James. And, you know, you and I have the same goals. I want people to do well and have a good life. Everybody watching the show, listening to it. But it's not great if they're sat at home with no job, is it? And that's many thousands more than we had under the Tories.
We're in a crisis of unemployment that we will be in for some time. We need to really look at the world, Mark. You're not going to like what I'm going to say here, but we're going to have to look at the world and what we are approaching, especially with the rise of AI at the moment, because a lot of the jobs that exist now will not exist in due course. If they want to take that seriously, if we still want people to have money in their pockets to spend, to generate, kind of resilience in the economy, then unfortunately we're going to have to look at models like universal basic income. That will be something. I'll make a bet right now with you, Mark. I bet you that right-wing Republicans in America within the next 5 years will be backing schemes like universal basic income.
Well, it's something that Elon Musk has been talking about favourably for several years. You're not wrong on that. Andy Burnham gets into number 10, 20th of July. You're hoping he doesn't let you down, James. How is he going to square that circle of tackling inequality, investing in public services with an economy in the red? How does he do that? How do you square that circle?
Yeah, it's not something I have the answer for. So if he asks me to be a Treasury advisor, he's knocking on the wrong door.
And what you have to do, you probably have to cut public spending, don't you? That's what you'll have to do.
Yeah, if you're a conservative.
Reduce the welfare bill?
No. I think Andy Burnham tends to follow a kind of Keynesian economics. So I think what he will hope to do is invest his way out of this slump. Now, that's not something anyone like you is going to support, Mark, let's be honest, because it's not your economic philosophy.
Well, we're very in debt, so I wouldn't borrow more money if I was in number 11.
A builder can't build a wall without tools to do so. So you have to invest to be able to get yourself out of a slump, Mark. That's been clear.
Okay, we've got the cost of servicing our debt at the moment. The interest alone is £100 billion a year. So are you willing to take up to 120, 130, 150?
I don't have the answers on exactly the borrowing figures, Mark. I don't think we need to borrow.
Well, the bottom line is we can't borrow another penny. But you use the snake oil language of investment. It's not investment, is it? It's borrowed billions.
You can invest in many ways, Mark. I mean, and look at the bond markets, you know. I mean, at the end of the day, what you should be doing is investing in things like infrastructure, investing in things that are not everyday expenses that you should not be borrowing for. I don't think you should be borrowing for every day.
Actually, I might agree with you on that. I think I probably do believe in borrowing so we can have bridges, roads and rail lines, proper buses across the country. I think I agree with you. I might borrow to build more hospitals and more schools. But that is not where we're at the moment. We are borrowing to service an unsustainable welfare bill, which is now bigger than the tax take of the country.
Yeah, but that's the thing that needs to change, isn't it? Because this idea of these fiscal rules Rachel Reeves set boxed her into a corner and basically limited her abilities. Yeah, but at the end of the day, you think Keir Starmer and all the rest of them are Marxists. They couldn't be further from it. They've just kept the same kind of neoliberal approach to economics going that we've had since Thatcher. You know, Blair was the same. So hopefully Burnham, I mean, his language seems to be good, but we'll see if it's followed up.
But I just don't know, James, and you're coming from a very good place, but I just don't know how Andy Burnham is going to pay for this progressive agenda.
Well, that's what we'll have to see. I want to see him outline that. And whoever's his chancellor is going to have a hard time doing so. What's he going to do? I mean, there's multiple levers available to him. Let's see which ones he wants to pull. I'm just going to...
Are we looking at... Do you think wealth taxes would be the answer, James?
Oh, I think a wealth tax would be great. Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know that we've talked about this on the show before. But whether he goes down that route or another one, I am waiting.
How is it a win? How is it a win for the British people if rich people leave the UK? How does that help us?
Well, you would think with the amount of effort that you're putting into defending rich people, you would.
I love
think
rich people.
You have some kind of vested interest in that.
Well, I don't. I love rich people because they pay most of the taxes. So, and I'm not one of them.
They don't, do they, though? Because the problem is so many of them run away and they don't like paying their taxes here.
When they're too high, because they have private jets.
Not very patriotic, Mark, to do that, I'm afraid. I tell you who is patriotic, the group Patriotic Millionaires. They're calling for an increase in wealth tax, and they are rich people. You should love them, Mark. They're patriotic millionaires.
Most definitely. Unfortunately, and I agree with you, but they're in the minority. Look at someone like James Dyson. His personal tax bill was £100 million last year. Briefly, before you go, James, how does it help us if rich people leave? So last year, 1 in 6 on the 2025 Sunday Times Rich List have left Britain. How does that help us?
Where did you get those stats from? Because patriotic millionaires have disproven
the Sunday Times.
Their own statistics
from the Sunday Times. No, I'm not talking about the 16,000 millionaires leaving this year, which has been debated and challenged. I'm talking about 1 in 6 on the Sunday Times Rich List left the UK last year. That is courtesy of the Sunday Times, who have the numbers.
Yeah, it's a shameful thing, isn't it, Mark, really? I mean, imagine getting that rich. And then what you want to do is you want to go somewhere else than this great nation of ours because you're scared of paying what you owe.
Yes, but you haven't explained to me how it helps us if they leave, because then they're not paying the taxes that they were paying when they were here.
It doesn't help us if we leave. You're all about being strong, Mark.
Now we're getting somewhere.
You're all about being on your values. You talk about when you come to...
So you want to keep rich people, because rich people pay the salaries of the nurses.
I want to keep the people
who like the nurses?
Yeah, Mark. I want the people
the poor nurses
who want to contribute to our economy and who want to fight for this.
You don't care about the nurses.
If you don't want to do that, you're welcome to jog on, you know, as a millionaire. But I'm afraid those who want to be here, the former CEO of Greggs, 180 millionaires who are going around the country at the moment begging people like you to listen to them, to say, we need to change how we tax wealth in this country. That's the reality.
James, always a treat. Thank you for the brilliant debate. It's been fascinating. I've learnt plenty. Do join us again soon when you can, please. James Mathewson, a former Labour Party spokesman and political commentator. Always great having James on. Fascinating. Your reaction, please, 03444991000. Unless you've been completely avoiding the telly, you'll know that the World Cup is properly up and running now. We're making a huge month. I keep saying that. We are marking a huge month of football here on Talk by giving you the chance to bag £26,000 tax-free. Just pause for a moment and think about that. £26,000 dropping straight into your bank account. What would you do with it? Clear a chunk of the mortgage, get a proper holiday booked, or give yourself a bit of a breather? If your account could do with a serious boost this summer, 26 grand in hard cash, here's how you enter.
For your chance to win, visit talk.tv/win or text TALK to 8338 by 6 p.m. on the 20th of July 2026. Texts cost £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or send your name and number by post to Comp 1 PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by midnight on the 23rd of July 2026. 18 plus, UK residents only. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 8338 now. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talk.tv/win.
Labour, interestingly, saying they're considering an emergency law to deport that grooming gang leader. This is Shabir Ahmed, who served 14 years of his 22-year sentence for 30 child rape cases. He got less than 6 months. Basically, if you're going to be a child rapist, you know what, you may as well rape 40 instead of 1, because the sentence is basically the same. I mean, we're literally incentivising child sodding rapists.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk, and I need your help today because I don't know whether Nigel Farage's decision to resign his Clacton-on-Sea seat is a masterstroke or a mistake. I just don't know. So someone that's going to help me is Michael, a brand new caller to Talk. He's in North Wales. Hi, Michael.
All right, Mark. Love the show.
Well, thank you, Michael. Are you by the coast? Are you at the sea?
Yeah, Prestatyn. Yeah.
Oh, what a lovely place. And, Michael, are you getting a nice breeze off the coast?
Well, not so much today, like, because it's very hot, about 34 degrees.
So it's absolutely baking even where you are?
Oh, yeah.
That's beautiful. I bet it looks nice, though.
No, it certainly does. It's a lovely area.
Well, Michael, you're lucky living there, and I'm so glad that you've called. Is this your first time calling Talk?
It certainly is, yeah.
Well, thank you for calling, Michael. First of many, I've got no doubt. Do you think this was a good move by Farage to gamble like this?
Well, I think it was really, because I mean, a week before or 2 weeks, he's been getting nothing, no airtime or nothing.
It's true.
And then the next day, I mean, he announces this. The next day, it's in all the papers. That's what he was banking on. And people are going, "What's in the papers? In the papers? What for?" Well, he's getting victimised, as far as I'm concerned. You know what I mean?
And do you not think, Michael, it's become a bit of a pantomime now, with the other parties not fielding a candidate, and it's just him and Binface?
Oh yeah, I mean, it is ridiculous. But they're frightened of him, man. He's going to win anyway. I mean, you know, he's going to win, but whether it's the Looney Party or the Binman, it doesn't matter. But the fact is, he's been victimised for a long time. I don't agree with the money. He should have mentioned about the money, but he didn't.
Right.
And that's what the whole thing is about. He should have declared it, and have done with it. But I watch Prime Minister's question times all the time.
Yeah.
And Nigel sometimes doesn't turn up because he gets abused. He can't retaliate. He can't. He asks a question and he can't ask another question. And yet Andy Burnham hasn't turned up for Parliament since he's been an MP.
It's true.
But nothing said about it.
And Michael, before I let you go, and you must call me again soon because you've made some brilliant points, do you think Nigel is going to ride out this storm? Does he become Prime Minister in 2 or 3 years' time?
Well, I hope it's not that long, to be honest. I don't think Burnham is up to it. I don't think he hasn't got the, what can I say?
The gravitas?
Manchester North, number 10 North and all this lot. I don't think he won't even give a statement. And the majority of these MPs, they read off a bit of paper. And yet Nigel will say it from the heart, you know what I mean? And that's what the difference is. So, I don't know. I think there'll be a general election early next year, May.
And Michael, very briefly...
So much of Burnham.
Yeah, I do. I think you're right. I think Burnham will be found out in high office. Michael, briefly, because I need to get to Dave, do you think that if there's an election in May next year, does Nigel win it?
Oh, of course. I'm in Deeside area. Well, I'm from Deeside, but I've moved up to the coast.
Yeah.
And they won a by-election yesterday, reform, by a big majority. This North Wales is all for reform. They see what's happening. And it's about the people that's coming in the country, you know.
Michael...
So I've no doubt he'll win. They'll win with a landslide, I think.
Fascinating. Michael, A Star is Born. I really look forward to you joining us again soon. Have a lovely afternoon. Enjoy Prestatyn, Martin. What a beautiful place. Sunny Prestatyn. There's a nice poem about that by Philip Larkin, isn't there? What a brilliant new call from Michael. Delighted to welcome Dave in Essex. Good afternoon, Dave. Thank you for calling Talk.
Oh, good afternoon, Mark. Right, if I was a voter in Clacton, let's say for the Labour Party, or the Lib Dems, or Conservative, and nobody stood in that election, I would say, my first thoughts would be, my party doesn't care about me. Am I correct?
Well, I completely agree. I think the messaging is a disaster. It also shows that they don't believe in democracy.
Of course they don't. It stands out a mile what they're trying to do. They're trying to destroy Nigel Farage and his party. And I sincerely hope it doesn't work.
Dave, if you were advising Nigel Farage, would you have supported this decision to quit his seat? Do you think it was a good move?
I'll go 50-50 on that one.
Yeah.
It was a good move because he caught them off guard. He really has. Now let's start looking at, once again, into the Labour Party and the Speaker going to the Cayman Islands.
Yeah.
And all of us for a holiday, so to speak, £250,000 out of taxpayers' money. Now, just recently, I believe within the last week or so, £4 million from a hedge fund.
Oh, my goodness, Dave, you're so right. All the parties have got their hands in the till, but for some reason, they're very focused on Nigel. I wonder why that would be. Dave, thank you for your call. I wish we had longer. A big hour to come. Next up, Edwina Curry remembers Ann Widdecombe.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good afternoon. It is 2 minutes past 3. Mark Dolan in for the brilliant Ian Collins. I'm back on breakfast tomorrow and Sunday. Do join me then. A big hour to come as we remember Ann Widdecombe. Very sad news. She has unexpectedly passed. What a figure of British politics and British public life. We'll be looking back at her extraordinary career, her extraordinary life. She was an amazing lady. She was very much a member of the Talk family. She enhanced this network whenever she appeared on it, which was multiple times a week. In many ways, it begs a question, which is, are authentic, principled politicians now a thing of the past? 0344 499 1000. Meanwhile, a police officer is hospitalised after being attacked with a bottle by a Moroccan football fan at the World Cup. And the political fallout continues following Nigel Farage's decision to resign his seat of Clacton-on-Sea, sparking a by-election. Was this a masterstroke or a big mistake? Will it backfire? I don't know. I can't decide, so I need you to help me. Was it a great move? Was it a mistake? Has Nigel Farage bitten off more than he can chew? My phone number is 0344 499 1000. I'm going to prioritise your calls this hour. It's been a busy show, but I want to know what you think, and I need your help because I cannot decide if it's a great move or a terrible, terrible mistake. Text the word TALK in your message to 87222 or leave us a voice note and let's talk. And I'm delighted to remember Ann Widdecombe in the company of one of my favourite ex-politicians, a politics legend in her own right, former government minister, broadcaster, best-selling author, Edwina Curry. Good afternoon, Edwina.
Hello from a really nice, cool study up in the sweltering Peak District.
You are making me so jealous. Edwina, we did not expect this terribly sad news because Ann Widdecombe was in pretty good health, very active on the airwaves, but we've lost her.
Yeah, it's come out of the blue, hasn't it? She did have a fall in January, but she was only treated as an outpatient for about, I think she was in and out for 3 hours, X-ray and all the rest of it, and she seemed to have recovered pretty well from that. But you know what, darling, you can't tell at our age when the great Grim Reaper is going to come. She's a great loss. I mean, we fought, and I didn't always agree with her, and I felt sometimes she did or said things that really didn't reflect very well on her. But you're right. They don't make them like that anymore, and more's the pity. The one thing you'll be absolutely sure of with Ann Widdecombe was she was not generated by AI, where most of the others, I think, are.
Was she an underrated Prime Minister? That's what Prime Minister Freudian said there. Was she an underrated politician, Edwina?
Yes, I think so. And it's partly, I think, because of her manner and her style and the way she went about things, because she was a really difficult, tricky person to deal with. And she played up to that. She didn't realise that actually if you're going to win friends and thereby influence people, occasionally you have to either keep your mouth shut or compromise a little bit or let somebody else go first. And she never, ever did that. And I think that was a shame. You know, she did actually think about standing for the leadership back when we were in opposition, and nobody would support her. And then when Michael Martin was forced to resign, the Speaker of the House of Commons, in the expenses scandal, she looked to see if she could get some support to stand for the speakership, and nobody would support her. And it was partly because she always felt like she didn't want to be friendly, she didn't want to be warm, she was incredibly aggressive. That made her a terrific debater, but there was no element of leadership in her whatsoever.
There was a hard shell. She wasn't going to press the flesh in the tea rooms or the House of Commons bars.
Well, she wasn't going to sit in the House of Commons bar and have a laugh with everybody. You don't have to always press the flesh. You don't always have to agree with people. It was a bit of a problem for the women back in those days, when she came into the House, I think there were 41 women MPs. And it was very difficult to be clubbable because it was very much a boys' club, particularly on our side, but on the Labour side as well. And some women managed to do it. But Anne was never going to be that sort of personality. She had decided long, long ago, and I knew her at university. She was in the Oxford Union just after I was. And she had decided long, long ago that getting close to humanity wasn't a good idea. She was much closer to her cats. We heard that she had a failed love affair and thereafter never trusted anybody to get really near to her. But you're right, she created a kind of shell all around herself. And it was a hard shell, and it got harder as she got older, which meant that the humanity inside kind of shriveled a little bit. I mean, she was in many ways such a positive force. I've heard from a journalist in Kent, who was a young journalist at the time when she was first an MP in Maidstone, that actually her constituents were fans. They didn't always like her, but they knew that she was a really doughty fighter for them, and that hearing Anne on the phone to the water company if you got a leak or a sewage problem was really quite an experience. And she was tenacious. She would push for a solution to a problem until she got what she wanted in the interests of her constituents. So we have to say, well done. I wish there were more MPs like that. When it came to her politics, she was totally sincere in her objection to the way the EU was running. She was always for Brexit. I'm not sure she was really planning to go to the European Parliament in her 60s, but she had the time of her life there. She really did, and made the most of it. And indeed, some of her speeches there are some of the best work that she did. So I regret her passing, I really do. And I wish we did have a few more like her.
Most definitely. And you remember her from university, and it's my understanding that you were in the House of Commons together for around 10 years. On a personal note, did you get on, notwithstanding some political disagreements, were you friendly with each other?
You couldn't be friends with Anne. I mean, that was part of the problem. You could be friends with other women MPs. You could be friends, you know, across the divide. You could have friends quietly on the other side working together, perhaps for the good of the constituency, that kind of thing. You couldn't be friends with Anne. She was too spiky. She was kind of pushing people away the whole time. And you're right, our careers kind of followed each other. I mean, for example, I turned down the job that she became quite famous in as Minister of State at the Home Office. She was the Minister for Prisons. She went and visited every single prison. That's a measure of the woman. And she also became very keen on improving education in prisons as a means of really preventing people being faced with a really hard time when they got out and ending up back in prison again. And that was also a measure of her kind of almost private compassion. But she also stood up in the House of Commons as the minister responsible and defended shackling pregnant women prisoners when they got to the maternity hospital. And you think, well, how on earth can you defend that? How callous can you be? And one of the obvious reasons was, you've never been in Labour, Anne. You don't know how horrible it can be. And if you're worried about somebody absconding, just put some more staff on. You know, there's always a slightly better, less cruel result, something that you could do to resolve the issue. And she never sought it, she never found it. And in the end, that kind of attitude, I think, added to the feeling that there was a hard heart at the centre of that particular government.
Yes, and maybe she had a self-destructive streak which thwarted her political career and ambitions. Meanwhile, Edwina, talking about political ambitions, Nigel Farage resigns his Clacton-on-Sea seat, sparking a by-election. Is this a masterstroke or a mistake?
Well, he's now fighting a bin, isn't he? I think it's hilarious, absolutely hilarious. I've very nearly contributed to Count Binface's crowdfunder. I gather that he was asking for £3 a time and had 8,000 responses within an hour or so, which is enough money to pay your legal expenses for an election campaign like this. And of course, Count Binface could win. which is not exactly what Nigel was expecting. Nigel was expecting, he said this, Nigel was expecting that all the others would stand against him and that he would again have, over 40% of the vote and come romping home and could use this as evidence that the people of Clacton had more sense than Westminster. And actually Westminster wasn't going to play his game. And that must have been obvious. Didn't anybody in Reform say to him, don't. Be careful what you wish for. You want the public, you want the voters of Cheltenham to express a view on what you've been up to with all your £5 million donations. You want them to express a view on you against the establishment. You're the millionaire, you're the multi-millionaire property-owning establishment, Nigel, and there's plenty of people in Clacton or wherever it is who might actually express a different view. That's where he's got himself. You made your bed, Nigel. Lie in it.
Yes, I think he's probably regretting this bold move. I think, Edwina, that he acted out of emotion rather than any kind of strategy or rational mindset.
Oh, I think you're probably wrong there. Sorry to say it, Mark. There's a big inquiry going on in Parliament. And that is not going to stop. It stops because of the by-election, because it's an inquiry into the behaviour of a member of Parliament. But it was looking pretty difficult for him. And that meant that he would have faced possibly being suspended from the House. Now, there are probably more than enough opponents amongst his electorate in Clacton to do a recall petition, so there would have had to be a by-election. And at that point, I think the main political parties would certainly have wanted to fight him, or they might have united against a single candidate. I don't think anyone was expecting Count Binface. John Harvey, stand-up comedian, very bright young man, to emerge as the front runner. But I think a lot of it was also peak, because who's been getting all the headlines recently? And that's Andy Burnham. And there's Nigel Farage, future Prime Minister, and he's looking at Andy Burnham and thinking, you're useless, you're useless. I should be the one that's on all the airwaves. I know what I'll do. I'll call a by-election and I will kill two birds with one stone. Might just have killed himself. We shall see.
Edwina, we have lost Ann Widdecombe, and it was wonderful to hear your thoughts and reflections on her life and career. Are authentic, principled politicians now a thing of the past?
There are some in the House of Commons like that still, and there are many in the House of Lords. The problem is that once you're in one of these august establishments, unless you're sitting as an independent, then to some extent you have to toe the party line. Otherwise, things just fall apart and nothing can ever get done. So you recognise that if the whips come to you and say, look, we need you to support this, and if you don't support it, we're going to be in difficulty, we might lose it, then you feel that you have to compromise and go with it. That's understandable. That's how party politics actually works. And all our parties are compromisers and really conglomerations of different viewpoints. That's how we try and do it before a general election. It's part of the strength, I think, of our system.
Every party is a political coalition.
Absolutely. Every party is. In other countries, they do the coalitions after the electorate has spoken, and usually the losers end up winning, which is not a great outcome. But principal politicians, yes. Do you get rich through politics? No. Do you manage to retain your integrity? Yes, you certainly can. You can do it with some determination. It's less common now because I don't think people come in with that kind of training. I mean, Anne and I were part of the post-war generation, brought up with duty and service and sacrifice and all that stuff. And Gen Z ain't like that. I can't see them delivering in quite the same sort of way. I wish them well, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Edwina, stay cool. You don't have to worry because you are the coolest person out there. My thanks to former government minister, best-selling author, the fantastic Edwina Curry. Thank you, Edwina. Well, the Daily Mail are breaking a story in regard to Ann Widdecombe. Police are today understood to be investigating the circumstances surrounding Ann's death. Friends of the former Conservative minister say they've been told by officers to brace for bad news, and a press conference will be held later this afternoon. Ann's death at the age of 78 was announced this morning after she was found at her home in Devon. Talk have reached out to the police. We will bring you more on that as we get it. But the police are investigating the circumstances surrounding Ann Widdecombe's death. A very sad day. We've very much lost a member of the Talk family, and Britain has lost a national treasure. Lots more to come. Nigel Farage, has he bitten off more than he can chew? This is Talk.
Labour, interestingly, saying they're considering an emergency law to deport that grooming gang leader. This is Shabir Ahmed, who served 14 years of his 22-year sentence for 30 child rape cases. He got less than 6 months. Basically, if you're going to be a child rapist, you know what, you may as well rape 40 instead of 1, because the sentence is basically the same. I mean, we're literally incentivising child sodding rapists.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It's 3:19 in the afternoon on Talk, and when I began this show at 1 p.m, I gave my own personal tribute to Ann Widdecombe, who was a friend and was always with me on air, on TV and on radio. She has been for many years. Formidable, entertaining, authentic, charming, and a completely unique personality. Well, we have a very concerning development in regard to her unexpected death. The police are investigating the sudden death of Ann Widdecombe over fears that she may have been murdered. The 78-year-old former Conservative minister turned Reform UK politician was found dead at her Dartmoor home in Devon on Thursday. Of course, that's the home from which she broadcasted here on Talk on so many occasions. She was a fixture of this network, featuring on Breakfast, featuring on my show at the weekend, with Jeremy, with Julia, with all of us. And Ann Widdecombe obviously was a national figure, former government minister. She was a star on Strictly, which gave her a whole new audience. It's understood that Ann was found, and this is a very difficult set of details to give you, and therefore, if you are of a sensitive nature, you may wish to switch off your radio or your computer right now. But it's understood that Ann was found covered in blood after sustaining a serious head wound. Devon and Cornwall police announced that they're investigating the circumstances of this head wound. Officers attended her home and spoke to a carer who worked for the former MP and who is believed to have found her body. Sources said police are trying to establish whether Ann had died following an accidental fall or whether she was the victim of an attacker. Now, what we're hearing is that Ann was found, most likely found by someone that was her carer, and that there was a lot of blood. It was a head wound, and the police are now trying to identify why that happened and how. So details of the suspicious circumstances of Ann's death have been kept under wraps over concerns around possible foul play. We don't know yet whether this was a tragic accident or whether a murder investigation is going to happen. It's truly extraordinary that we even have to go there in this conversation, because when I came on air at 1 o'clock, having listened to Alex Phillips's amazing tribute to Anne at 10 a.m, I thought we were going to spend this show just remembering an amazing lady, such a character, such a one-off, so ideologically consistent, a woman of faith, a personality, good-humoured. I mean, we just loved Anne. We could not get enough of her. I was simply an uber fan. And to be on air now, to reflect not just on her passing, which is far too soon, 78 years of age, still fighting fit with loads of energy, still politically active, to now have to look at the circumstances of her death and to countenance the possibility that someone may have murdered Anne is truly shocking, truly chilling, truly devastating. Now, Anne was, of course, a Home Office minister under John Major's government. In my view, an underrated politician with huge gifts, very articulate, an attention to detail, a work ethic that would have Margaret Thatcher blushing. As the brilliant Edwina Curry told me just a few minutes ago, as Home Office Minister, she visited every prison in the land, and she did not fall into the stereotype of the hang 'em and flog 'em variety of Conservative politicians, because she really believed that prison should be a constructive environment and it should be about rehabilitation. So if you're just joining us, the Sun newspaper are reporting that the police are investigating the sudden death of Ann Widdecombe over fears she may have been murdered. Let's get reaction now from Talk's international editor, Isabel Oakeshott. Good afternoon, Isabel.
Oh, good afternoon, Mark. Well, this really is a truly shocking development in this tragic case. You know, we were all, as you say, just absorbing the fact that Anne was no longer with us. I mean, I wouldn't say I knew her well, but I spoke to her only a couple of weeks ago at some kind of reform event. I can't remember which one, because she was often at them. And she was on Talk only a couple of days ago, wasn't she?
Yeah.
And so it was quite a shock that she had suddenly passed away. But then she was in her late 70s, and we all know that elderly people sometimes do just, unfortunately, drop dead, as it were. And so I guess all of us took that at face value. I had heard yesterday that I was aware of Anne's passing before it became public knowledge, just because of her links to the party. A few of us were informed a bit earlier than it became public, and I was aware that it was being kept a little bit quiet until the police had done some more investigating, because I think she did live on her own, as I understand it, doesn't have children, wasn't married. Again, I took that at face value. It's routine. You know, if somebody dies suddenly, generally, you know, there is an attendance of the police. So to then hear today that there may be suspicious circumstances, that is an absolute jaw dropper. And I understand that there's going to be a press conference from Devon and Cornwall Police that begins in the next few minutes. Whether it's a statement, whether it's interactive, I'm not quite sure. So we haven't got long to wait before we hear more of what they have to say. I don't have any further inside information, and if I did, of course, I wouldn't share it. It wouldn't be right to. But it will be, well, we just have to wait and see whether they are saying it's definitely suspicious or quite what the terms they are, they're framing it in. I don't know much about where she lived, whether it was a remote house or, what the setting there was. But this, if there was foul play, the implications of that are astonishing.
Well, they are. And you've covered crime stories in the past, Isabel. If this was a case of murder, it won't take long for the police and the forensic cops to identify that. It won't take them too long to identify the difference between a tragic accident and murder.
Well, you'd hope not. And I don't know what evidence there is in terms of CCTV, in terms of what type of property it was.
And of course, the nature of the injury.
Exactly that. But again, if anyone at any age, if you fall over badly and hit your head, then you can die of a head injury.
Yeah.
So these things are. I just feel really uncomfortable about speculating at all, because we don't have long at all to find out what the police have to say. But the fact of the matter is, there's only one bit of speculation that I will put here, and that is that if there was foul play involved, there are really two scenarios, aren't there? One, that it was let's say a burglary that went wrong, and the second, that this was politically motivated, that it was some political thing. Both of them are horror stories, utterly tragic and sickening. But the second, the idea that this was politically motivated, obviously has a very different set of implications. And those in public life that, they really put themselves out there, people like Anne and all of our prominent politicians are, they are vulnerable. And let's see, what the police have to say. But I really, really hope this isn't a case of a personally politically targeted thing. But I have no information to suggest that that is the case.
That's absolutely right. She was a Reform UK supporter. It's my view, Isabel, that she didn't leave the Conservative Party. She was a lifelong Tory. She didn't leave the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party left her by shifting leftwards, by making a mess of Brexit, and by becoming what she said to me on air as institutionally woke. She was an important figure within Reform, wasn't she? She wasn't on the front bench or anything like that, but she was a flag bearer for the whole project.
And what Nigel Farage said this morning about her was so true. Anne had her differences over the years with some of what Reform's various leaders did, whether it was Nigel, whether it was Richard. But she would never speak out in a way that would damage the movement. That was her point of principle. And when she rang up my partner, Richard Tice, when he was leader of the party, he would always take a phone call from Anne extremely seriously indeed. And she would always have wise counsel. She might say, well, have you thought this through? Here's another dimension to this. And Reform's members loved her. Sometimes I sort of had some frustrations looking at things from a kind of political optics point of view. I would think, well, is she too old a demographic? Is she cool enough? We're trying to trying to attract new members. And Richard would always say to me, are you serious? Our people absolutely love Ann Widdecombe. And that was the case. They did. And she would go out on stage at Reform conferences, at Reform events, without any notes at all. She would just stride onto the stage and give a barnstorming speech. That was the level of her political experience. If ever there was somebody that was unbiddable, it was Ann Widdecombe. She'd say exactly what she thought, but she was utterly trustworthy.
And her departure...
And in politics, that's in short supply.
Yeah, her departure from the Tory party, I think, was indicative of the ideological drift that happened under the Conservatives in office. She was something of a canary in the coal mine there, wasn't she?
I think you're right when you say that, she never left the Conservatives, the party left her. And in a funny sort of way, although she was, stridently behind Reform, and, she was a Brexit Party MEP, wasn't she? I think she was.
She was.
Sure
she was. And she spoke with great command in the chamber.
So technically she absolutely had left the Tories. She'd basically defected. But somehow or other, perhaps it was because she always wore those very Thatcherite blue, royal blue suits. One still slightly thought of her as a Tory, even though she demonstrably wasn't anymore. And, her kind of ideological and value system was of another era in a way. She's very Catholic. I know some of our contributors have been reflecting on that today. Well, very Christian. I think she was a Catholic. She had very...
Yes, she was an Anglican, and she moved over to the Roman Catholic Church when the Church of England were ordaining women priests.
Right. So, some people would characterize that as being in some way, not in favor of equality for women or diversity and inclusion or whatever. And I'm sure she'd have had some choice words to say about that. But she's just very socially conservative. This is a woman that had chosen never to get married, never to have children. She just was quite kind of unique in that way. And I got very used to seeing her kind of trundling into the green room of any, this is the room where all the reform leadership or for other political parties, same for them, to gather before public events. And she would always be there and just sort of, she wouldn't be very vocal on those sort of those gatherings. She would just be there. And there was no need to really sort of prep her for anything. She'd maybe have a quiet word with Nigel or with Richard, this is what my speech is going to be. And then out she'd go and do it, and she'd bring the house down.
Isabel, I'm so grateful that you've joined us at very short notice. We will speak soon. Isabel Oakeshott is Talk's international editor. If you're just joining us, police are investigating the sudden death of Ann Widdecombe over fears that she may have been murdered. We'll bring you more on this next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk. It is 3:34 in the afternoon. Mark Dolan in for Ian Collins. If you're just joining us, a worrying development surrounding the passing of Ann Widdecombe. Police are investigating Ann's sudden death over fears that she may have been murdered. The 78-year-old former Conservative minister turned Reform UK politician was found dead at her Dartmoor home in Devon yesterday. It's understood she was found, and some of the details here are very graphic, and if you're of a sensitive nature, you may want to switch off your radio or your computer at the moment. It's understood that she was found covered in blood after sustaining a serious head wound. We don't know whether it was a terrible fall or whether or not she was attacked. Her carer found her, having deceased. Sources say police are trying to establish whether Ann may have died following an accidental fall or if she was the victim of an attacker. Let's get more reflections on this in the company of Nigel Evans, former Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons, former Conservative MP for the Ribble Valley. Good afternoon, Nigel.
Good afternoon, Mark. It's a very tragic day.
Nigel, did you know Ann personally?
Oh, yes. I was with Isabel Oakeshott just 3 weeks ago at the launch of a book by Michael Ashcroft on Nigel Farage, and Ann Widdecombe was there. And I went up to her and I said, Ann, can I talk to you about your Catholic faith? And she smiled and she said, yes, but when are you joining Reform, Nigel? And I laughed and I said, I'm not, Ann. And she said, pity. She looked in very great shape indeed. You know, she's formidable. I've known her for decades. I was elected in '92 and was already there. I remember in 2009 when Michael Martin resigned as Speaker of the House of Commons. I was in the back of a taxi when the news came through, and I said to another Tory MP, how about Ann Widdecombe replacing Michael Martin? And that's what we did. We approached Anne and she agreed. I nominated her along with Nadine Dorris and Mark Pritchard and a few others. And of course, we gave it all we possibly could. The problem for Anne, though, was that she'd already announced she was standing down in 2010. But I think she would have made a formidable Speaker of the House of Commons. And as you may remember, Mark, I went through my own troubles, my legal troubles as well, and I had a trial. And I had to get some references of people who knew me well. I asked Ann Widdecombe for a reference. She happily gave it, and it was part of a bundle that the jury saw. She was true. And by the way, I've also got a quote from Kemi Badenoch, who's paid tribute to Ann Widdecombe today. She says, "My deepest condolences and those of the Conservative Party to the family and friends of Ann Widdecombe. She was a formidable politician who was never afraid to speak her mind and fought hard for what she believed. Always true to herself, her politics were strongly guided by her faith and her values. Rest in peace, Anne." I mean, everybody I know who knew Anne, worked with Anne, will feel a sense of great loss today and a sense of great worry as well by the developments that we are hearing about now.
Well, it's so difficult, isn't it? And we know about Ann Widdecombe, the broadcaster, and Ann Widdecombe, the politician, Nigel. Can you tell me about Anne, the woman?
Oh, she was just true, as Kemi Badenoch has just said. She was not a weather vane. She was a compass in politics where people seem to pay tribute to fashion, just go where the fashion happens to be. Anne never did any of that. She just stood to her principles, whatever they happened to be. For instance, I was in the House of Commons when she gave her speech about the banning of fox hunting. Now, you'd think her being a right-wing politician, she'd been totally in favour of the continuation of fox hunting. Oh, no. She absolutely believed in the protection of all life, including animals, particularly animals. As you know, she had her own cat. She was absolutely strident in giving a speech which was formidable in saying that she said, "I've got fox hunting on my curtains. They're a part of English history, and that's where it should remain." She was absolutely strident, but she was always somebody you could rely on, very dependable. I was so sad when she announced she was leaving politics. Well, she wasn't leaving politics, she was leaving Parliament. And, you know, she never got the proper recognition, Mark. She was never made a dame other than through the Catholic Church. And she was never put in the House of Lords, which she should have been. She deserved a place in the House of Lords. I actually spoke to her at the book launch just a few weeks ago, and I said, "Anne, why haven't you been put in the House of Lords?" And she said, "Well, I don't know, but maybe in the future." So I think she had every prospect of, had Reform got either won the next election or indeed got a significant number of MPs and then clearly would have got some nominations for the House of Lords. I would have rather hoped that Anne would have been top of that list.
She was only 78, and notwithstanding a fall in January of this year, she had a lot more living to do, Nigel.
Yeah, absolutely. You heard from Isabel Oakeshott that she would take to the stage and give strident speeches. I mean, I was used to them at the Conservative Party conference, particularly when she was Shadow Home Secretary, and she was very tough. As you know, on drugs, for instance, where she believed there should be no compromise or no concessions on that front whatsoever. And of course, as you may remember, when she was in the Shadow Home ministerial team and her boss was Michael Howard, they didn't get on. They both had strong opinions. And it was Anne who torpedoed Michael Howard's attempt to become leader of the Tory party when she said he had something of the night about him. And there were gasps in the chamber of the House of Commons when she came out with that. And she always stood by that, actually, even after when Michael lost that leadership bid and afterwards when Michael became leader of the Tory party. So she never changed her mind about Michael then.
No, and he never really shook off that label, did he?
No, it definitely cost him. that early leadership bid. And yes, he carried that. But I mean, the fact that we're mentioning it now, and that happened so many decades ago, just shows you that Anne made a view about Michael Howard. She worked very closely with him. She took an opinion and she never wavered from it. And she didn't fear from expressing that opinion either. Most people might have said it privately to other people, but she didn't. She wanted people to know what she felt about Michael Howard. And she did. She expressed it.
Well, most definitely. She didn't tolerate fools. She didn't suffer fools gladly. She also could be a prickly personality. Do you think that harmed her career at all?
No, I don't think it harmed her career, and I absolutely treasure the fact that we had people like Ann Widdecombe in political life. You want people like that, people who hold strong views, think about them deeply. It was just the same when she converted from the Church of England to Catholicism. It's not a decision she would have taken lightly. I was in the Hall, Westminster Hall, when Pope Benedict visited, and I think that was in 2010. And I remember the hall was absolutely packed. Ann Widdecombe was sitting towards the middle of the hall, and John Bercow led the Pope from the stage right to the door. And he made a point of taking the Pope to Anne in order for them to have a chat. You know, of course, Anne was offered to become ambassador to the Holy See under William Hague. It's something that I rather had hoped that, or was it under David Cameron? But it was a position that I'd rather hoped that she would have taken. It was under Cameron. If she had taken that position, it would have been absolutely wonderful. But she decided that she wasn't going to do it. And I don't know why. I mean, there was speculation that there wasn't sufficient funding for that particular position. And so she wasn't going to compromise that when she was doing so many other things. And as you know, if you read the obituaries, Mark, you can only but smile at some of the things that then Anne went on to, like Strictly Come Dancing. I mean, I was watching some footage of that this morning in the incredible yellow outfit that she was wearing, and and she threw herself into it when you would hardly think that it would be the sort of thing that she did, but she did it with gusto.
She most definitely did. What a personality. What do you think about the sort of significance of this news and in relation to the kind of politicians we have these days, Nigel? Do you think authentic figures like Anne are a thing of the past now on the political scene?
No, I do not. I always believe that there are people who are prepared to speak their minds. That's what politics is all about. People don't want wishy-washy characters in politics. Yes, it is way more dangerous, as we've seen from the death of Joe Cox and David Amis. And indeed, Ann Widdecombe spoke at the funeral of David Amis. They were very, very close friends indeed. I believe that, we've got to be very cautious about the way that we protect some of these people who are prepared to put their heads above the parapet, say things as they see it. We know that there are a lot of Marmite politicians out there, and we also know that people are prepared now these days to attack politicians in the way that I've just described. And I think that we've just got to be cautious about the sort of protection that we give. I don't want people to shut up. I want people to be more like Ann Widdecombe, to express the views that they've got. There's plenty of people out there, Mark, who will have agreed with everything that Ann Widdecombe had said. And thank goodness for talkTV, that is an organ that gave her the opportunity to express the views that she had. And, you know, we're just grateful that she was able, even when she moved on to the Reform Party, that she was able to do that through the medium of talkTV. And, you know, I suspect, you know, Mark, that I believe like Kemi Badenoch is somebody who's got very, very strong views. I know there's a ton of people out there who don't believe in things that Kemi says, particularly about stopping the boats and leaving the ECHR and stuff like that. But we need politicians of that fibre, of that resilience. We just need to ensure that they get the proper protection. I just hope that this investigation proves that it was a tragic accident rather than a murder. But at the same stage, I'm just taking on board the more general point that you're making, and that is that more politicians are coming under attack these days.
Most definitely. Well, as Nigel has just said there, police are investigating the unexpected death of Ann Widdecombe over fears that she may have been murdered. We're expecting a police statement at around 4:30 p.m. So this will be covered on Drive with Kevin O'Sullivan. We'll bring you more as we get it. Nigel Evans is the former Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons, former Conservative MP for the Ribble Valley. Was Ann Widdecombe an underrated politician, Nigel?
Very much.
We will come to Nigel Evans a little later. It sounded like I was wrapping up, didn't it? But, folks, let me just tell you that we're dealing with this bombshell development in regard to the passing of Ann Widdecombe. Police are investigating what may have happened. Let me give you some details. And these details are very difficult because they are quite graphic. It's understood that Ann was found covered in blood after sustaining a serious head wound. Devon and Cornwall police have announced they're investigating the circumstances of Ann's death. Nigel, I think we've got you back. Before I let you go, I just wanted to ask you whether Ann was an underrated politician.
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt. Absolutely she was. I believe that she could have got to the very top. I mean, I think she took the view, you know, when she decided to retire from Parliament in 2010, that she'd probably hit a glass ceiling. You know, she made derogatory remarks about herself, about her own appearance, but she didn't care about that. And the vast majority of people in the country don't care about it either. They prefer politicians who actually believe in something strongly, as Ann did when she worked things through, rather than somebody who had the looks of an actress. She knew she didn't have that. But I don't even think that held her back either. I just think that it wasn't her time for whatever the reason happened to be. There was more sort of what I would call consensual politics, Mark, and I'm almost saying that with some disdain in my throat, because like Ann, I actually believe in things, and I know that you can't make an omelette without breaking some eggs, and that's the way that Ann, I think, took life. It's a great shame that, as I said, when we gave it a good go to make her Speaker of the House of Commons, I think she would have been absolutely formidable. I also said to her, by the way, that when I said, if you do become Speaker, Ann, of course, as you know, nobody contests your seat, so it might well be that then in 2010 she would have carried on, and I would rather hope that she would have done that. But there again, it wasn't to be her time. I just think that she got that sense herself, that there was a glass ceiling there, and that she wanted to broaden her horizons into diversifying herself out of politics, which is what she did in such an incredible way. And it was great to see her coming back in the later years, albeit as a Reform member, but there again, with her strong views that she felt that, for instance, Brexit hadn't been done properly, and she wanted to make sure that it was going to be done properly. So, you know, I say this now, Mark. Everybody in the political family who knew her, whether they were from her politics or not, Rosie Duffield has said some wonderful things today about her not being the same politics, but what a great independent-minded person that Ann Widdecombe was, and how she stood up for many of the things that Rosie Duffield was fighting on as well. So, you know, may Ann rest in peace, but may she rise in glory.
Most definitely. That's beautifully put. And she was a friend of yours, and you've been a friend to her this afternoon in reflecting on an amazing life and an amazing lady. Thank you, Nigel. Really appreciate your time. Nigel Evans, former Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons. The Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, has posted the following on X. I'm deeply saddened to hear of the death of Ann Widdecombe. The circumstances of her death are extremely distressing, and my thoughts are with Ann's family and loved ones. Ann's dedication to public service was decades long, and she was a true servant of her constituents. The Home Secretary goes on to say, I've spoken to the Chief Constable of Devon and Cornwall Police today. The Home Office stands ready to provide whatever support they need with their ongoing investigation. I urge everyone to avoid speculation and allow the police investigation to progress. Well, that's a tweet, that's a post from the Home Secretary. Ann, of course, was a Home Office minister. We'll bring more on this after the break. If you're just joining us, the police are investigating the sudden death of Ann Widdecombe over fears that she may have been murdered. This is Talk, and there's more to come.
Labour, interestingly, saying they're considering an emergency law to deport that grooming gang leader. This is Shabir Ahmed, who served 14 years of his 22-year sentence for 30 child rape cases. He got less than 6 months. Basically, if you're going to be a child rapist, you know what, you may as well rape 40 instead of 1, because the sentence is basically the same. I mean, we're literally incentivising child sodding rapists.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk. It's Mark Dolan broadcasting on this network, and we can bring you some breaking news, which is that it's our understanding that Ann Widdecombe was likely murdered in the last 24 hours. Devon and Cornwall police have said a murder investigation has now been launched into the death of Ann Widdecombe. Police say that the murder inquiry is in its early stages whilst they look for a white male suspect. But if you're just joining us, it appears that Ann Widdecombe was murdered at the age of 78 in her Devon home. Let me bring you some more lines from Devon and Cornwall police, who have released a statement in regard to this murder investigation. Detective Chief Inspector Rosson says this is an extremely tragic incident and our thoughts are very much with the family and friends of Ann Widdecombe at this difficult time. Our murder inquiry is in its early stages, but moving at significant pace. We are deploying all of the necessary resources to find out exactly what has happened and to locate the person responsible, who we believe to be a white male. This officer goes on to say, I'd appeal to anyone who may have information about this incident, however insignificant it may seem, to come forward and speak with us. We're particularly keen to hear from anyone who may have seen anything suspicious in the vicinity of Hayter Vale, Hayter, or anyone with CCTV, doorbell or dash cam footage which could assist with our investigation. They go on to say we have an increased uniformed police presence in the area to both support the investigation and provide reassurance to residents. Anyone with concerns can speak with our officers at the scene. They go on to say we will release further information when we are able to do so. In the meantime, we would ask people not to speculate about what might have happened, particularly on social media. This is not only potentially harmful to our investigation, but also deeply distressing for family and friends of Ann Widdecombe. Now, Ann's last interview was on Talk, on this network, on The Breakfast Show on Wednesday, and it was me that had the privilege of speaking to Ann for her last broadcast. She had so much living to do. She was such an authentic person. She was so principled, so ideologically consistent. She was a woman of faith. She was entertaining. She was good-humoured. She was canny. She was wise. She had a brain the size of a planet. She had incredible political pedigree, having served as a Conservative government minister. She was in the House of Commons for 23 years. And she went beyond politics. She was a reality TV star. She won a whole army of fans on Strictly. She was a remarkable lady. And here we are, broadcasting on a network that welcomed Ann multiple times a week. This was her preferred broadcast platform. And she appeared on Julia's show, Peter, myself, JK, everyone welcomed Ann onto this network. And now we have to report the news that a murder investigation is now being conducted by Devon and Cornwall police. Earlier, we were looking at a scenario of a tragic accident. Ann did have a fall in January of this year. And in fact, because Ann was a friend of mine, I was in text contact with her about her fall. And she was supposed to be coming on the show and she couldn't do it because she was in A&E waiting for an X-ray. And even then, she took a no-nonsense approach. No fuss was made. She said, I'll be as right as rain. I'll be out in a matter of minutes. And of course, she did recover from that injury. So there was some speculation that what may have happened yesterday was a nasty fall. But now we know that we're looking at a murder investigation. Devon and Cornwall police are in pursuit of a white male, and they've said that this investigation is moving at a significant pace. The murder inquiry is in the early stages, but moving at a significant pace. Locals in the area are being asked to help if they've got any evidence whatsoever. If anything was caught on a doorbell cam, on CCTV, then they're being urged to reach out to Devon and Cornwall police. It's truly unimaginable what Anne may have gone through in the final minutes of her life. It's truly shocking. This is a lady that wouldn't harm a fly. She was a very fiery figure, very feisty, but diminutive, a very, very small lady with a big personality. But she was a very kind lady with a big heart. She was good-humoured. She was caring. She was very empathetic. She was very passionate about rehabilitation in prisons. She didn't want it to be hang 'em and flog 'em. She was a nuanced politician, and she was enjoying her retirement whilst never giving up the politics, of course, latterly supporting Reform UK and Nigel Farage. Well, Kevin O'Sullivan is live at 4 o'clock, and now we can move beyond the speculation about a tragic accident. This is a murder investigation, Kevin.
It's extraordinary. I mean, we've just literally had to rip up the whole show. We will devote the entire 3 hours, the next 3 hours, to this shocking, extraordinary story. The fact that this remarkable lady, that her life should end